Because I didn't take notes on stuff.
Okay. You got what you need, though? I don't want to put you in a bad way.
Buzz right on, but I don't have, like, you to turn that.
Come up with a so then I avoid that whole part.
Yeah. It's, of course, they're building all by us, so there's one way in, one way out. Latter County is that what they do? I mean, it's a done deal, like, it's not.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's just not the amount of time he wants our property. Because everything, we have 5 acres, so everything around us is what's, so it's,
Well,
I don't know where we'll go. I mean, we'll never get what we have someplace else. I mean, it's far away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here so early. Appreciate it. We can go ahead and get started with the workshop. Dr. Pace?
Sure. Good morning, Chairwoman Castillo and members of the board. Excited to be here today to provide our mid-year update on our strategic plan. So we're going to talk a little bit about the goals and the activities that we agreed to do, the outcomes that we have so far, and then a little bit more about the challenges that we see as we move forward to make sure we finish strong for the end of the year. This is really an opportunity for us to share with you where we are, but also to problem solve with you as a board about how we move ourselves forward, and then also to begin getting some thoughts and ideas about where you think the next strategic plan should go. Obviously, we're searching for a new superintendent, doing a lot of community forum gathering, but we need some kind of a plan to carry us into the new year to give that new superintendent an opportunity to work with you, understand your priorities, and then move something forward. I know that was the first priority when I came in March of 2016. We're going to start just with a recap of our mission, inspiring all learners to reach their highest potential as responsible, productive citizens. And if you remember, last summer, we changed our vision just a little bit to really focus on future-ready graduates. We've always, in our vision, worked in partnership with families in the community because we know the school district doesn't act in a vacuum. But it's really about thinking about the end in mind. What is it we want our students to know and be able to do in order to have successful, happy lives? On the next page is that portrait of a graduate that we compiled from your feedback and stakeholder feedback from across the district and across the community. So just to highlight a couple, obviously oral and written communication are super important. We've learned, particularly since the pandemic, that perseverance and resilience, that grit, is very, very important for folks to be successful. And then that basic academic competence, those fundamental skills in reading and math and science, that knowledge of history, is just super important for them to be successful. We're going to start today with our Goal 5 team, kind of work our way backwards. We've always said that our strategic plan, all 5 goals matter. We cannot have academic success, positive outcomes for our kids without kids feeling safe and secure and welcomed at school. We cannot do our best work with our students if we aren't engaging with our parents and our communities and families and empowering families to be able to better help their students in their learning. We can't do anything without the resources to do it, right? So it's that financial piece, financial stability. We've talked about talent management being a critical feature. We've got to have the great people, the great teachers in our classrooms, the great leaders in our schools, as well as the tremendous supporting staff that it takes to operate a district. And then overall, goal 1 is our mission, academic success for all students. So this is our Goal 5 team. Mr. Phelps is our deputy superintendent for students, or student and humans. We call it human services. He takes care of the big people and the little people. And he works closely with this team, also with our safety and security team on the things that matter. Darla Bungo is our Director of Student Services for a little while longer. I have recommended tonight that Dr. McMahon begin to transition with Dr. Bungo, who has served, or Ms. Bungo, who has served the district tremendously for how many years? 36 years. With her is Sherry Waretka, who is responsible for our PBIS program, Diane Jones, who works with our social worker psychologists as our coordinator in the student services area, Tony Lampanese, who works very closely with our social workers and psychologists, and then Sarah Schumacher, who is our our coordinator for school counseling. And in the back somewhere is Anthony Cook. He's our coordinator for college and career counseling. He primarily works out of the Goal 1 team. So team, take it away.
Well, good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a little bit of time sharing the progress that we've made in Goal 5. Just a recap of the goal statement: to improve school climate through positive behavior, enhance mental health support, and life skills development needed for future-ready graduates. Wanted to start off with just an update on our middle school mentor program. If you recall, we've given you a little bit of an update previously. We have some additional information to share today. Our pilot schools were Discovery Intermediate, Denjon Middle, Kissimmee Middle, and Parkway, as well as St. Cloud Middle. St. Cloud Middle actually had the program last year. Actually, where it started, we were very impressed with the teacher took the initiative to gather up some of the students that she saw had a need for a mentor. She recruited mentors from the community and from her school, went out and got some donations to fund the mentor program. So we really kind of used that model as our stepping stone to pilot it in the other schools. We have a total of 38 students participating, both boys and girls. So the schools have been successful in getting mentors with mentees. We're still in progress as to the meetings and that type of thing. I don't have any data to show just yet, since we are still in the early stages of getting the mentor and mentees together and having them meet. But the data that we will be looking at would be grades, discipline, attendance, to see where we started off and kind of where we ended at the end of the year. Hoping to expand that into other middle schools for next year, and I'd like to have the discussion about even including maybe some 5th grade pilots at some of our elementary schools as well.
What's the outcome that you hope to have with this?
Well, the end goal would be for those 38 kids to have better attendance, have fewer discipline incidents, and have improved academic performance.
How will the schools select the students that would be in this program?
The way they selected them were just those 3 criteria. If they were struggling academically, if they were somewhat of a frequent flyer in the dean's office, if there were some attendance concerns, they hand-selected a very few number of kids for each one of those schools. That's why 38 is not a huge number for all of those schools, so they were very strategic in how they selected them.
Who are the mentors that
From the community, from the school?
St. Cloud Middle, I think, has a few that are community members, but the majority of them, we wanted to start with just our own staff. So it's any staff within that school. They're already cleared, through OASIS, so we didn't have to worry about child abuse reporting and all that. They're already trained, so that's kind of like the first step for us. We would like to eventually invite the community to be part of it. And we've talked with this Take Stock in Children.
I was gonna say that it reminds me of Take Stock, so.
We talked with them as well, and we will eventually partner up with them to utilize some of the same structures that they use for their training.
Can I ask you also the K-8 models? So I see, because their middle school is the big piece of the K-8 too. Is this something that's going to be implemented in the K-8 as well?
When we expand, it is our hope to get to all middle schools. That would
Okay.
include the K-8s.
Okay.
Yep. And that would be an ideal location to start piloting our fifth grade as well.
Grade still,
Yep.
yeah.
One thing that I'm wondering in general as we move through this strategic plan and then forward for the rest of the board who's here is we have the new Parent Bill of Rights, and a lot of that does involve parent involvement and ensuring that we give folks access to how to be involved with parents. So I wonder in general with goal setting and thinking about the larger community, how we can tie some of these back to what are the rights and maybe responsibilities of parents when thinking about some of these.
We do make sure that parents are aware that their students have been selected or identified to participate in the mentoring program.
Yeah, I was thinking more like larger, not just, talking to those specific parents, but in general, I mean, board member Cahoon asked about who else is involved, what community members. This would be a great way to involve the community in taking, having a stake in ensuring that our students are performing well.
And that is our goal, is to get mentors from outside,
Yeah.
from business and from the community.
Thank you.
So moving on to our panorama survey. We completed our fall and winter survey windows. The fall district response was 85%. The winter response was 66%. The spring window will open up in the end of February. The team has tried to get that taken care of prior to the upswing in testing, so there is no conflict with that. 66% for the optional survey we think was a pretty good response. I know when talking to Sarah the other day, she said 70% is kind of our target, so we weren't really too far off from that. So what do the schools do with that data? They take that data. Sarah actually helps to work with individual counselors at the schools to review the data, look for trends, any areas of concern, problem solve what they could potentially do at the schools. A lot of our schools are also including their students with the survey results, and getting some additional feedback and their ideas on how the school could help to problem solve and improve in those particular areas or whatever those results were. We've had a couple of schools also that the students presented the responses to the faculty during a faculty meeting. And we feel like that's a really strong approach for the kids to be the ones who are taking the initiative on the results. And we feel like teachers hear it a little bit better coming from the kids as opposed to the principal or assistant principal standing up there. So we've had some good feedback from the schools that have done that. Our mental health or wellness lessons, which are required by statute, those are built into the curriculum unit plans, and we are seeing good results as far as the implementation and the delivery of those lessons. Yeah, not going to lie, some of that's been a bit of a struggle for some of our teachers. It is outside of their comfort level for those lessons, but the school counselors have done a really good job of trying to take the guesswork out of it, preparing the videos, preparing the lessons, modeling those. to ensure that it's hopefully a little bit more comfortable for the teachers to deliver those lessons.
The mental health training that teachers are having to go through, is that in conjunction with this for them to don't have?
It's- No.
The youth mental health first aid training is more about identifying signs, symptoms, and knowing where your resources are. Darla can address that, really well. And it's a state requirement. The mental health, the content of the mental health lessons is also in state statute. And so this is something that parents can't opt their students out of. So.
And Ms. Noon, I'll also provide an update on the youth mental health first aid as we get through our presentation. So you can see the lessons completed. The way Sarah is gathering this information is through administrators on the day the lessons are being delivered. They go into the classrooms, ensure that the lessons are actually being conducted, and then they report that back to Sarah. So that's how we're getting our percentages. So you can see the percentages are pretty good as far as middle school, anywhere from 86% up to 96% for the month of December. High schools, 87% starting out, and we're up to 88% for December.
I have a question on that, because if somebody has like some kind of disability, because they have like dyslexia, they can do a 504 screening or an IEP screening. If somebody feels like they may have some potential mental health issues, do we have a screening for that, or do we just automatically refer them out to like an outside provider?
No.
No, we usually screen also the social workers along with the school counselors. Sometimes the school psychologists, we do an assessment and an intake. And then if we need to, we will refer out. But a lot of them are able to do some of that counseling at the school.
Now, if they do the assessment, does that make them eligible for an IEP? Because is there an IEP for mental health? You know what I mean? Is there any kind of alteration of the plan at all for them? Or?
No, it depends on what the IEP says. It has to be mostly academic in the IEP. For the counseling, that would be a separate issue.
So attendance data, I've provided the attendance data since we started this school year. I believe our January rate was 92%. We are working with REA to look at some additional interventions. The student services team and the school counselors, we've worked over the years to implement some strategies and some interventions. They may be maybe getting a little stale, if you will, looking for new ideas. And I know that Leah and the REA team have some good ideas as to what we could potentially do to improve our interventions and hopefully get some additional kids into school. Our target really has been 94%, and we haven't made it that, except for the first couple of months of school. So we are working hard to try to get that percentage back up a little bit. So Ms. Cahoon, you had started in asking about the question about youth mental health first aid. That has been a challenge, for us. We have one vendor that we are able to use through the state. Getting started with the youth mental health first aid training was a little late because everyone was trying to get onboarded with the one vendor. Getting contracts approved, they had very strict guidelines as far as getting things approved and what order they wanted things done. But we made it through all of that. So we really didn't get a real lift for youth mental health first aid training until we started probably December. We are required by statute by July 1 to be at 80%. Right now, we're at about 40%, but I think we're probably even a little bit better than that because we've had ongoing training since we did this presentation.
We now have 2 trainers trained at each school to be able to deliver the training. But as Mr. Phelps said, the one vendor for the entire state for this youth mental health first aid training has some very specific requirements. It has to be face-to-face. It can't be digital. It can be no more than how many at a time?
50 participants.
No more than 50 participants in one setting. So, for example, on January the 3rd or 4th, whichever day was the work day, one trainer would be in the media center with 50 or however signed up, and another trainer at the school would be someplace else with the others if they could get to it. But there'll be a big push over spring break, as well as then throughout the month of June, to try to get this accomplished. Saturdays,
One day a month on a Monday at Student Services, we're really pushing it.
it's good quality training. My entire team completed the youth mental health first aid training, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Tony was our trainer, and she does an excellent job. It's not about training teachers to be psychologists or social workers or counselors, and that's where sometimes there's a little bit of discomfort. But it is about noticing those signs that show that a student perhaps maybe dealing with some trauma, some stress, emotions, and knowing where to go for resources.
I will say that we had a couple principals who obviously participated along with their staff, and they mentioned how good the training was.
I saw good feedback on social media from some friends that attended the Saturday training, and so that's why I was just wondering.
Yeah, very good.
So they said.
And then we tried to do the à la carte thing. We're trying to offer it during work days when they're available, Saturdays, other days. There's money built in for substitutes, there's money built in for stipends, and the majority of staff have been able to, make it accommodate somewhere. We've had a couple bumps in the road, but, we've worked over those.
The 80% goal, is that an internal goal, or is that something we have
That's
to
the
have?
law.
So what happens if we don't hit that by July 1?
State. It's a state requirement. It's a part of our mental health allocation, so we don't know yet if they would potentially reduce some of our categorical funding. My guess is what they would do is instead probably say you must allocate X portion of your mental health allocation to providing this training or getting people trained to achieve your goal before you can do the other things that we do in our mental health plan, which is something the board approves every summer.
Is there a way to get an update on this, like, since this was the December number, to see how we're doing for January and in February to see, because I want to be able to.
We'll provide a monthly update to the board. Okay, you can just send it to me and I'll make sure I send it to you guys in a Friday board update.
We just got the job codes that will be included in that 80%. Were just released from DOE on February 1st. So we are working with professional development and research departments to make sure that our numbers will now be accurate. We were giving it our very best guess until February 1st as to who fell into that 80% trained category. Now we know, so we should have a report within the next week. Just get that to you.
If someone can send me the statute for the mental health lessons, and if anyone knows what is, I'm going to ask this question a lot, what is the outcome that is desired by having this implemented in schools? I mean, I know intellectually, right, and emotionally, we want our children to have a more stable mental health, which then, helps to have a safer environment and a more secure environment. But are there any benchmarks that we're supposed to meet? How do we know that having these mental health lessons and making sure that 96% of students attend the lessons, how do we know that that's actually making an impact and moving the needle? Are those things that are implemented or talked about in the statute itself? Okay, just do this, and these are the numbers.
Do this. I mean, there's research that shows, obviously, that mental health is a key factor in a student's success, both academically, behaviorally, and long-term. So I think that's the purpose, is a preventative one, to give kids information to help them be more proactive and make better decisions about their personal lives and personal spaces. And you would hope that that would improve their love of learning, their desire to go to school, their ability to engage effectively with others, social interactions. But is there a direct correlation between cause and effect or effect and cause? We don't have that, and the state doesn't measure that. It's just, they're measuring, did you check the box?
This is only middle and high school, correct?
6 through 12. And so one of the reasons why the high school numbers are a little different is because we have dual enrollment students who aren't on campus when these lessons are taught.
So if it's so is there two sets of lessons then? So there's lessons for staff to get trained on it, and then is there a certain amount of interactions the staff has to have with students then? at the same time?
The
or-
mental health lessons are specifically for students. The youth mental health first aid training is for staff.
Okay, so they have to be prepared to give the class, so to speak.
And I just want to give kudos to our school counselors, our social workers,
Counselor week, right?
Yes, it is.
and our psychs.
School counselor
And we had
week.
deans also who stepped up to be those two partner trainers at each school. It is out of their wheelhouse for some, and getting up in front of, a group and presenting. So it really has been a lift from quite a number of people to make it happen. And I'm pleased with the progress we've made so far in the short period of time that we've actually been able to train. So I feel confident that we're going to get to that 80%. So moving on to discipline support. If you recall, towards the beginning of the school year, the student services staff presented to you the substance abuse awareness option for those students who were a first-time offender for a drug-related event. So I've given you some statistics as to what our numbers look like as far as the offenses. So our drug offense, our alcohol offense, and drug paraphernalia, each one of those is up some. Being quite honest, we did not necessarily anticipate that our number of drug offenses would drop this first year. Our anticipation was to get students into the program, get them, trained, if you will, or get them more aware of the dangers of a substance, and have fewer recidivism, because that's what we did see a lot of in the past years is repeat offenders. So you can see the numbers there. As far as the referrals, we've had 154 referrals for one of those three offenses. 18 were recommended for expulsion due to missing an appointment or failure to comply with the requirements. And just a reminder on the tiers. The first tier, they would be referred to the AWARE program. If they didn't complete it or refused it, they would move to the tier 2, which is a 45 to 90 day time at New Beginnings, and they would receive another type of curriculum through Eckerd Connects, and I'll explain that a little bit more when we get into the presentation a little bit more.
So the ultimate goal is that you would see a reduction in drug issues. We aren't there yet, but we are seeing that the kids who participate in the program are not doing it again, which that's at least a start.
It's an intervention.
Intervention.
And we didn't have that before. We didn't have an education program before. The awareness that your vape with the THC percentage of marijuana oil is at like a 90% concentration rate, where the regular weed that's rolled up and used is like at a 3%. So when parents hear that and the students hear that, it makes a big difference. The parents are there and now they're aware, or as Tom has indicated, some of the parents had no idea their kid was involved in this and just thought it was a flavored whatever. So it's essential that parents and students in the community know, and that's what we were putting in this year. We hadn't had it.
And we've had great feedback from parents. They value the information. They didn't know what to look for. So that sparked conversation amongst the team as to how can we get information out to be even more preventative, so parents could watch a video or have a parent night, something to get some more information out to parents as to what to look for. So that's part of what we're hoping to move forward to in the next strategic plan, would be how do we get some community outreach for this particular
And
topic.
that would be to all parents, not just the ones identified through the
Correct.
violations.
Yeah, it would be available. That's the, I guess, the task or the hurdle is, how do you get parents to watch those videos or to be part of those conversations when they don't really see yet that they have that need to watch that and understand what to look for.
Now, the 154, are those the number of just first-time offenses? Because I believe that in order to go to Park Place, if they do the third offense, they're not eligible for the program, right? Or is it only the first time?
Within this year, we started fresh this year, first offense. We've had a couple with a second offense, but just a couple, where before it was just like a revolving door.
So what does that 154 then represent? The number of offenses or the number of people who decided to go to
This is
the
the
Park
number
Place?
of offenses and the number of referrals that have been received through student services and ESE to move to the AWARE program. And then there's a, a breakdown here as to, the progress that we've made. So
But he's asking, could there be, could someone have been referred twice, one person?
No.
So that'd be 154 students. have been
Correct, they're all individuals.
Yeah, individuals.
So, and there's possible more cases, because those are the ones that are referred. So like somebody's like on the third case or something like that, that wouldn't be reflected, the total number of cases.
That would be correct. There may be an additional offense, and we've actually had, since we did this, we had 2 repeat offenders, but they were repeat offenders within the time period that they were waiting to
To go to the program.
enroll. So they moved to Tier 2.
Right. So out of that 154 that went into the program, only 50 of them have graduated though.
Correct, because the other ones, they're still in the program, because it
Ah,
takes
okay,
about
okay.
6 to 8 weeks for them to complete.
So that's not the complete, I see, because it sounds like, that's not even like a 25% graduation rate.
No,
That's like they're not.
The ones that are the difference are either in the program or awaiting their slot to enroll in the program.
How many can be serviced at a time through the program?
Well, Park Place has to make sure that they have a workable number, so they wait till they have the number, because the parents and the students, and they have their staff. They haven't given us an exact number. They're trying to run it simultaneously, like 3 different times. Startup time, then another startup time to capture, so they're getting the same lesson. So I don't have that number, but we should be having a graduation soon, a completion. It's not graduation, but those that have completed. And I don't have that, but I'm not sure, I don't know, 10, 12 sets of parents and students might be about what they do, but I don't have it yet. It's new this year for them and for us. We're fortunate, it's not costing the district a penny. It's all based on Park Place's funding that they got via grants. So, I work with them now.
I'm going to continue.
So, yeah, speaking of the grant then, how long is the grant for?
They don't see an ending. It's a source that, as long as they're doing this prevention, that they should be able to continue. It's kind of like an allocation in a sense. They had to apply for the monies. Now that they got it and they're showing results, I don't think it'll end. Because it's becoming more prevalent, we need to do more and more. So I don't see that going away anytime soon.
Is this something that we could potentially supplement with our mental health allocation if we had to? I would think it would cover it.
If we had to, but I'm hoping that we don't.
Right, I know, but I'm just saying, you do have the state mental health allocation in your FEFP budget, which the governor has recommended an increase for those dollars for statewide.
I like this kind of program because we already have so much to do.
Yep.
So this is a great community partnership.
Absolutely.
Got results and teachers are teaching.
Yes, right.
This is after hours. This is not during school.
Right. The only thing I can just kind of, I like to play both sides of the fence. Ideally, why spend money from the district when you got another pot of money?
Yeah, we don't want to.
Correct. But I like to think, though, I think a step ahead. One reason that you would do that is if you're looking at the level of service. Like you're telling me, out of the 154, only 50 are going there because you're not getting a cohort or they don't have enough staff. So how long are they waiting in the queue? So if they had the incident occur, now they're waiting 6 months before they get into the
No.
programs, then that means that
There is a
they're
little bit of a delay
short-sighted
right
on
now.
that. No, but I'm talking about, no, and I'm just talking about in theory, but that's the number I want to see, though. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause that's the only justification I can think of. If they're waiting 6 months to get in, there's a chance that they're not getting they just got caught, they had no consequence, they had no education, they're stuck in limbo, and they can get back into that
Well,
again.
They're in school.
They're in school. I mean, that was one of the whole purposes of the program was they'd get a short-term suspension and they would remain at their school site for that first offense. And you see one of the bullets here is that, we've avoided 800 days of suspension with the program. So we're keeping kids in school and trying to be proactive and give them additional information so that they don't do this again. So if you're okay, we'd like to go ahead and move along because I know we've got 4 other goals to go through. Quickly, Eckerd Connects is another substance abuse awareness type of program. They've partnered with Highlands, Central, New Beginnings, and Neptune Elementary. And their curriculum, and it's a full-time individual at the school, is to get into classrooms and provide lessons on resilience and substance abuse. Neptune Elementary had a parent night, which was very well attended and very well received through the Eckerd Connect folks. And like Starla said, this program is at no cost to the district. and we're seeing some really good results from the program. And this is part of Tier 2 for the substance awareness program through New Beginnings. So if they're referred for a referral to New Beginnings for that 45 to 90 days, they would be connected with Eckerd Connect's staff. Just summaries of our classroom disruptions and some of our discipline. You can see our overall incidents for discipline have increased 511 events, and want to make sure that everybody understands that that is all levels of offenses. So it could be our throwing an object, it could be tardies to class, it could be skipping class, it's any of our local events. Our assessor events are up by 176, and those are the ones that we report to the state. And I'll give you a little bit more information on that in the next slide. Out-of-school suspensions have reduced by 247 days, and in-school suspension is reduced by 330.
You might wonder, why is there an increase in events and a reduction in suspensions? We are looking to make sure we're implementing PBIS and having some proactive interventions, less exclusionary practice, which is what your suspension does, but also there's been a significant increase in emphasis on tardies in our high schools, and so that's contributing to a lot of this. And so,
What period is this starting?
This would be starting in August, first day of school.
So, okay, so this is the school.
Yeah, it's essentially
Yeah.
first semester. Moving on to the next slide. These are some of our assessor incidents that we report to the state. I'm not going to read through all of those. You can see some of those incidents are up slightly, and we have net weapons violation is down. There have been some changes in the coding, which you saw at the last board meeting. So PHA, which is physical attack, is now considered simple battery. The DRDs, the drug distribution, that's not part of the AWARE program. If they're caught distributing anything, they're recommended for expulsion, so they don't have the option to go into the AWARE program. One other thing I just would like to point out is that we do review discipline data on a quarterly basis. I highlight things with the schools, and it really depends. Sometimes I look at everything in a quarter. Other times I may look at just assessor events. We may look at fights or more serious events. So there's a variety of different things that I'll do with the school administration when we have those quarterly meetings. One of the other things that we do, working with our REA team, is to pull referrals. They help us to audit them quarterly. So they go through every referral and look for language that might be CESR related. And then if it flags and it wasn't CESR coded, we go back and review that discipline event to say, should it have been a CESR event, or was the language not appropriately worded? Those are the things that we need to kind of go through. So we have an audit process to ensure that we are accurately recording and reporting CESR events.
Huge emphasis with the state office of safe schools to make sure that districts are reporting CESR incidents accurately so that they can compare apples to apples across the state.
The Expect Respect is through our partners at Help Now. You can see the schools that have done that for fall semester and the ones that we're currently working on for spring semester. And that's really about teen dating violence prevention. So it provides our teens in high schools information about teen dating violence and basically about relationships and having positive relationships in and outside of school.
And this is another community partnership with Help Now.
Yep.
It is,
I
yep.
know them very well.
Yep.
I have a few questions before we get to next steps. Is that okay?
Yep.
First, going back to slide 6, do we have any hypothesis or theories as to why the events have increased for discipline for all incidents and for CESR incidents? Do we have any idea?
When I look at the data, a lot of what I see when I'm talking to individual schools, we see a lot of tardies, we see a lot of skipping class, late to school, and that's a secondary thing for the most part. Schools are trying their best to put interventions in place, but they are focusing on it. So you will see an increase in referrals. I'm not saying that's all of that, but a good portion of the increases that I see at each school are just those.
I think it is important to note, I apologize for interrupting, but on page 7, all of the assessor incidents come from 1% of our student population.
Oh,
right
sure,
now.
I'm not,
So, we're having to deal with those kids on a more significant level on a recurring basis.
so yes, thank you for that clarification. Couple things, I think it is actually really important to know the categories of these incidents because, for example, if you're telling me that the increases in this and the incidents are because of tardies, then that means that there might be an issue that is outside of the control of students, and it might be something that we can focus on and solve. So I would be interested to see where, the breakdown of these specific incidents and which one of those are things that might be within our control with education, or maybe there's too much traffic.
Yeah, it could be a-
And why are we
Yeah,
giving students, an incident because of something that's outside of their control, in my opinion. I don't know.
Especially, elementary, middle school, we rely on parents to get them to school. And if it's a parent that is continuously making their child late, I don't want a student to suffer
Thank you.
and not enjoy coming to school because now they're in trouble.
Right, and we do try to find a balance there of really working with that parent to
Right.
say, your child's missing instructional time, and that matters. Particularly because a lot of our younger learners, they will hit academics pretty much right out of the gate in the morning when the children are fresh. So if they're missing 10, 15 minutes of their 90-minute reading block, that's a problem, Mom.
Yep.
We've got to try to figure out what's going on here. But you're right, we don't want kids to feel like they're not punished. And I know sometimes your high school kids are like, oh, if I'm going to be late and I'm going to get in trouble, I'm just not going to come.
Yeah, I
We
think it's
don't want
different. We've
that
got to
either.
look at high school
Right.
differently than elementary, middle.
Right.
It's already between class versus the first class.
To my next question, I do see here some interventions that involve parents, but some of them are outside partners. What are we doing internally to engage parents in this conversation? Do we have any tactics that we are implementing?
I guess as far as attendance or?
Just in general, so in general, right, we just talked about some of these may be outside of a student's control, but they're the ones who are being punished for it, one. And two, when I think of discipline issues specifically, it's a reflection of what's happening outside of school. They're just bringing in whatever they're learning, wherever it is, into the schools. And so trying to solve a problem at a place where they're gonna go out and relearn the same behavior and bring it back doesn't solve the problem. So how are we engaging the larger community in this conversation, specifically parents? Do we have support for parents to understand better discipline practices, for example? I don't know if that's our role, one, so I'm not saying that's our role, but I am saying, is that a question that we should be asking? They're bringing that into the school. If we can't solve what's happening in the environment, we're not gonna solve this problem. Just don't know if there's any input on that, or,
Well, specifically for attendance, we do have a small amount of staff in student services that help us with truancy, and part of their role is to reach out to parents and explain, the importance of being in school, providing them some statistics on kids who don't attend school and that they're more at risk for being retained, that type of stuff. And we do step it up to truancy court as well. Diane has works with the judicial system and takes parents to court, for lack of a better phrase, I guess, and have the judge explain the importance of attending school. So there is some community outreach for that, but it's really about that individual student. I think what you're asking for is how do we just get information out in general through community relations, and we do push out information on attendance and the importance of being at school. Through BEST, we're getting information out as to the importance of again, being at school, what's expected as far as behavior, those types of things. But we're using social media to try to do some of that.
But I think it's also about those individual conversations with parents and guardians when their child has been in trouble. I think there's definitely opportunity for us to look at how could we be more proactive on the front end about making sure parents understand expectations for conduct on campus, avoiding fights, okay? If somebody hits you, that doesn't mean you get to hit them back. We do expect you to take steps as a student before that fight occurs to seek help from an adult on campus and prevent the fight. Sorry, sir. And that's not something that all parents and families understand or respect, to be quite honest. But I think that's an area where we certainly can think about what else we could do.
Asking. I'm curious to know, as we're thinking about next steps and where this next conversation is taking us, how we can better engage community partners and specific parents, caretakers, whatever, in the outcomes of safety and security. That was my last point.
Got it.
Okay, is there an answer to that, or?
No, it's a next step.
Oh, it's the next step, okay, all right.
I don't have an answer today, tomorrow, other than what I just said. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, two things. One of them's my original question, and one of them was based on what I heard as well. Well, both of them are kind of. The other incident issue too is not just the board seeing the number of incidents and the specifics of it, so we can kind of tell if it's more fighting or tardies, but also by school. I know that's not a favorite topic of folks, but the reality is, if there's an incidence in drugs at one school more than the other, that tells a different story too. Or you talk about tardies. The buses, may be late at one school, not the other. So there might be an issue with recruiting a bus driver for there because we might find out that there's turnover ratio there because that bus driver doesn't want to drive, I'm not trying to pick a particular school, but just AZ school, like no bus driver wants to drive to that school. So that's a different story. So how, like what Chairman Castillo was saying, we react to the data. Because to me, it's not just about getting the data, okay, great, what are we doing about it? But sometimes it's getting ahead of the data and saying, okay, well, what do we need to modify in order to try to minimize that as much as possible? So I know it doesn't look good. That shows, because it could be, that one statistic may be two schools. And, there might be 176, it might be two, so it's a skewing it, and just like, oh, it's 176 for the entire school. You got one principal that got that school in lockdown. That one principal, and I'm going to recognize one at the board meeting tonight, one of them's got them like, man, little angels, man, whenever there's an incident. The other one, and again, this isn't an easy topic to talk about, because, we're comparing, leadership styles to leadership, but to me, that's part of accountability. And one of them may not have that same level of control, command and control in their school. So, and I'm not trying to point fingers, but to me, it's not even about, to me, the part of accountability isn't saying, okay, this person's bad and let's slap them in the face. But when we talk about professional development, well, if one principal has a good command and control structure and one doesn't, then maybe we can teach them strategies. So it's not always punitive in nature. It's just a reality conversation and say, okay, well, what are you doing to maintain better command and control in your school versus another one?
And that is an ongoing process in which Tom does the quarterly data meetings on attendance and discipline with every school. And then that information is also something that the 3 assistant superintendents are working with individual schools and principals on. And like you said, this principal has things locked down, things are tight. Okay, maybe we need to send that principal to visit that school. And those are things that are happening with your leadership team.
Absolutely. And so to me, that's part of when we talk about strategic plan, so we don't have to micromanage. If we see those things and say, okay, this is the incidence, this is the variance, this one school is bad, and this is the plan and how we're trying to get there, that makes us feel better to like, okay, you guys are on top of it, and because we want to help. At least I do. It's like, and I can tell that's the essence of Chairman Castillo's point, is not to be punitive, but to sit there and say, if we need to change something, we can. Now, the other thing is, maybe a parental sign-off, because I remember this was an issue that we talked about before. The number of expulsions were increasing in incidents after the pandemic. Some of the students were having trouble socially adjusting back to a new campus and talking to people and sharing and things like that. So some of this was post-pandemic, right? So I can get that. But at some point, we're getting past the pandemic and we're getting to like normalized data, right? But one thing we did talk about was if somebody gets out of school suspension or in school suspension, that they talk to somebody on the way back. right? But I even think that we can take another form and have like an exit survey or a re-entry survey and have maybe the parents sign off on it. Because if we want parental involvement, if they got out of school suspension for fighting, that maybe the parents have to sign the little form and say, okay, my little Johnny's gonna come back to school. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm making an example. No, my little Johnny's coming back to school, I promise not to fight again. You know what I mean? Almost have like a contractual obligation that they sign, and kind of like we do with bullying. You know, we say, hey, we promise not to touch this other person again. So when they reintegrate back in the school from out of school into school suspension, they sign some kind of promissory note that says they're not going to do whatever they do again, and the parent signs it too. And it's just, I don't know, it's not really binding, but you know what I mean? But just another level of, you know, to get them to be cognizant of what they did.
And that goes along with the last next steps. Yep, as far as expanding opportunities for students to have extra referrals.
And I can assure you, I was at a school the other day, first thing out of the gate for the morning, and there was a student who was coming back from suspension, sitting in the office waiting for the guidance counselor to come in from supervision to have that meeting before he transitioned back to school. All right, thank you so much, Go Find team.
Yep. I want to thank the team.
Anybody else have questions before we transition?
And while we're transitioning, I just want to make sure that we thank Darla for her many years of service.
Absolutely.
She's kept students, you know, in her focus throughout the many years she's been director and been in the district, and we appreciate everything that she's done to serve the kids. Thank you.
Thank you, team. Goal 4, step right up. We'll have to transition pretty quickly to make sure that we honor our time because we have a hard stop at 11. Board members, I'm pleased to introduce our Goal 4 team. You know Dana, our Public Information Officer, as well as Ms. Dr. Clayton, who was our Assistant Superintendent for Charter and Choice, and they are our Goal 4 champions, along with Sherry Waretka, who is also a part of Goal 4.
Good morning. We're making great progress with Goal 4, and that really is to build advocacy, engagement, empowerment, and capacity of all stakeholders in support of successful, future-ready graduates. So this year, we are using Thought Exchange for the first time, and it really is to ask what we don't know or what we need to know, really engage our stakeholders, and most importantly, listen, and then also to scale the conversation. I've listed out some of the thought exchanges that we have done for administrators and teachers, and I've given you the top 3 rated responses for each question that we've asked. Really, it allows us to scale the conversation, like I mentioned, so it has served us well. Dr. Pace has done 11 virtual teacher talks this year, and in preparation for that, we sent out the Thought Exchange survey, and it really, as we've gotten the responses back, it really helped Dr. Pace tailor the conversation to their needs in that focus group. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Dr. Pace.
Obviously, salary was a big issue and high on the minds of our teachers, but more importantly, there were things, as you can see from the question, what makes you feel most valued and appreciated for the work you do? It's that trusting relationship with their administrator and also feeling valued and respected in their work. So we talked in our focus groups about how that's important, what we can do to improve that and increase that, but then also what are the obstacles that are getting in the way of them doing their best work? And some were things that were easy fixes. Making sure that we have a typing app so that our elementary students can learn a typing application and be able to complete their computer-based assessments more readily. Because there's a station built in some of our centers and our cups in which that's something that they can do. And then some other things like kids were coming to school with their devices and they would lose power during the day. So we put additional chargers in every media center across the district. So if somebody doesn't have if their computer dies or their iPad dies during the day, they can run to the media center, check out a charger, and be right back in class. The teacher doesn't have to hold up on testing. So those were just some of those little things that those conversations in small groups have been really helpful. But the Thought Exchange started that question. And I would give the Thought Exchange information and also my focus group details back to our principals at our monthly meetings.
As you know, the school board is going to be utilizing Thought Exchange, and that'll be our first time that we have done the entire community. So we're excited about that, to get input and engagement for the superintendent search process. A next point was the insight survey results. You had a presentation at your board meeting, so you know kind of what the domains were and where the district ranked. Certainly there are areas that we're identifying there for improvement as well, so we're using that as a tool. This year we started the superintendent's blog. We started a podcast. So from a communication standpoint, those are expanding. Also, the Osceola Best campaign is what Mr. Phelps referred to earlier. It's our social media remind campaign out to all students and parents. The B in Best stands for be in attendance. So those are our attendance messages and reminders. E is efforts towards learning. That certainly is tips and thoughts on how to really parents can help their kids in the learning, either at home or at school. S is show respect to all, and those are our anti-bullying messages. And T is take time to do the right thing, and those are our reinforcements to say that if you see something, say something, and that we will always investigate. And so that's our best campaign. There's some great work, important work being done in giving students a voice in the district, so I'm gonna let Sherry talk about that.
So last year I started with 6 high schools with student voice. So as I reached out to the principals and got their buy-in, then they selected a sponsor at the school that chose students. I really wanted it to be a diverse representation on the campus. A lot of times, especially at a high school, you hear a lot from student government, which is a very elite group of students. And while that is valuable, I really wanted to hear from students who don't have a voice, and especially students who have experienced the discipline processes. They know what it's like going to the dean's office, getting a referral, maybe even getting suspended. So it's that broad, diverse. It was very successful last year, got a lot of good feedback. So this year we expanded it to add 3 additional high schools, and then we also did it at 2 middle schools. So we've already met at all the schools in the fall, and then last Friday and the Friday before, we brought the students from the high schools together and had a big gathering together. So they were together for the whole day to actually be able to see what is happening on individual campuses and get some ideas. We did some work with the panorama data. They looked at that, tried to look at some areas that were highlights, but then some areas of concerns and what are some things that they could do. And then we talked about some kindness initiatives for them to start on campus. And then we also did address attendance with them to get their input on what are some ideas to help with attendance. So we didn't bring all the middle schools together, but then I'll go again in the spring, probably in like April, May, and meet at the individual schools again.
And last, in January at our principal meeting, Sherry shared some of the highlights of that were common across those with our principals, and then also reminded the principals how important it is that they engage with the students who are part of this process. Because if we ask kids, we need to show that we've heard them and listen to them.
See the results of that? I'd love to see what the students are saying.
Yep, I'll be happy to send it to you. Just send it to me.
Can I ask about the BASS campaign? It's on social media only?
We also take every message and do a remind text message out to all parents in the district as well with our best messaging. It's 4 times a month.
Yeah, okay.
I was kind of thinking on that too, like how we can increase like the visual of that to our community. I don't know if there can be some marketing ad dollars that are put behind that on social media to get that one out there. I think something a little more consistent. I have seen it.
Yeah.
But since we are saying that that is an area that we really are concerned with, how can we get it out there more?
Or so, like, not all parents are on social media. Maybe perhaps they do have to sign in the front office having a dedicated location or something.
We also have
front
best
office.
posters that we did for every single school. They were given a big supply of posters to put all around in parent areas and student areas. But any thoughts about that?
And planners are used at all the elementary and middle, or do we still use those anymore? So
I
that,
don't think we're using them everywhere.
okay. If there's a way
Especially
to
not
get,
since we've gone electronic.
gotcha, if there's a way for that, like if there are schools that are, there's a
Actually,
way to get that into
Even
anything.
bigger. Why, and I don't know if you're already doing this, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like we are interested in having this be like, maybe like a model right here, Osceola, best practice, everybody knows about best. So I wonder if this could be something that could be even launched yearly at like parent night or the choice fair, maybe that's a good, you have a lot of people there. Yeah, just like at the beginning of the year, that's like part of the experience.
We invite, when we kicked off the campaign, we invite parents and students to bring their Osceola best. And that's what, and it's attendance, and it's anti-bullying, and it's making good decisions, and see something, say something. So we tried to make one campaign that had a lot of positive messages, but we will definitely look into how we can spread that word.
I wonder if Joel Davis has any of his like bus things.
We can ask.
Put posters or.
We can ask. Also, choice programs, offerings, and opportunities, certainly a huge part of Goal 4. So Mrs. Clayton will share.
So we have a lot of exciting things that are happening in all of our schools. And this year, the Choice Fair, of course, every year we highlight those great things happening at the schools. And the schools actually come and showcase their best. And there were some additional things that happened this year with students leading interactive experiences for parents and other students, which we want to expand that even further for next year. But this year, we had nearly 4,000 in attendance, which was somewhere between 400 and 500 more than the prior year. And as a result, the very first day of applications for Choice, we had 400 more applications for Choice. And just to put that a little bit in perspective, right now, to date, we have 2,038 Choice applications. That was as of a couple weeks ago. It has increased because the deadline was on January 31st. We currently have 10,033 students in our schools that are on a Choice.
So you're saying that they don't attend their zone school, they're attending a different school?
For a
because
choice
specific
program or a
like that.
choice school. They may be at their school, but in a very specific choice program, such as Celebration IB. They may have already been zoned for IB or for Celebration, but they're choiced into IB. But we have 10,033 students who are currently enrolled as a choice student. Today, we run the lottery for where there are seats available today and tomorrow. So we will see how many more are on Choice for the coming year. As of the date that this information was pulled, we were looking at a total of 799 new FTE to our district. So we do include, we see a lot of students that apply from charter schools, home education, and out of district as well. So we're trying to make sure that they are attracted to our schools and programs. And so one of the initiatives that began last year, and we are improving this year and have some more improvements to make, is realigning the pathways all the way down into the elementary schools and having some big anchor program at the elementary school that can really be the highlight, not just embedded. We have arts that are embedded every day, but something that is really special about that school that we can highlight. And so we have 14 elementary schools that have already started that. Implementation, soft implementation this year, 14 more that have begun their planning for implementation next year. And we've realigned all the way from elementary to middle to high school around the career clusters rather than just a passion project. It was beginning as a passion project, but we felt like we already have some structures in place that are really important in our CTE outcomes, our post-secondary outcomes, and with our career exploration through our Zello surveys. So we took all of the departments, we coordinated with elementary, middle, high, CTE, counseling, Anthony's Zello, career surveys, and came up with, we wanted to be fully in alignment with the nationally recognized career clusters. So our program development is being developed under those nationally recognized career clusters that are listed there.
Are these clusters that we are projecting to be high employment in the future? Is that what the focus is?
Yes.
Yep, okay.
Highway high demand career fields.
Like, one of them that I know for a fact is at the high school, at Osceola High School, they have the aviation program. We created the dual enrollment program for Embry-Riddle. But when I went to the orientation at Embry-Riddle, when they talked about the program, they said they have like a exposure at the middle school level. They have like a little curriculum built for that, to give kids a little bump into that. Are we looking at maybe, is that the kind of the process?
That's kind of the process that we're trying to create feeder patterns where it is exploratory in middle
And so in other words, I
school.
guess the point with that is, instead of just choosing middle school at random, just for me to understand it,
Exactly.
go to a middle school that feeds into Osceola High School.
would
So if
choose
we have like,
Kissimmee Middle.
Kissimmee Middle, yeah, I know Thacker, but Thacker's in elementary, yeah. Middle school, so that way, they're aligned that way as well.
Yes, and we have our choice parent booklet. It's very, very comprehensive, and it shows all of those pathways and where they can feed to each other. And I'm going to just throw it out there. House Bill 1 is in discussion, and this is going to be even more important now than ever before for us to be really great at marketing our schools and having these anchor programs, and it being very attractive for parents to want to stay in their zone school or go to that specialized program. And we have a couple next steps that we'll talk about.
The next steps in our area of Goal 4 include aligning thought exchange with the strategic plan. So looking at goals, not just in Goal 4, but in 1 and 2 and 3 and 5, and then seeing what do we, again, need to know, want to know, but also engage stakeholders in the process. So we're taking the strategic plan, working with the goal leads to put them together. That's what the next steps is for thought exchange. Also, a part of that, Dr. Pace is really big on closing the communication loop. When people provide input and thoughts and opinions, take lots of surveys, but what do we do about it, right? They don't hear the results or actions that have been taken, so we are trying to be more intentional in closing that loop, that if you've taken a survey or given us your opinions, here's the results and here's what was generated by that input. Also, just like we were talking about, we want to partner in the community and certainly with student services and REA department to broaden the BEST campaign and to bring partners in and figure out how we can get those important parent and student messages out there more. And then also something that we're doing is we're conducting school communications audits where we work with, my community relations team is working individually with communication folks that have taken the lead on different communications platforms and marketing and all that kind of stuff, and working one-on-one with my team and their team in building the best communication that they can, having plans in place and support and resources that they might not have that we can help provide. So we're taking an individual school approach to try to bolster communications as well.
In other words, kind of identifying some of those schools that don't have a strong social media presence right now, or their website isn't kept up to date, and providing individual support and guidance to beef that up across the district.
Correct.
Do y'all have a social media calendar that every school should follow?
We don't technically, but a lot of times they know to look to Janae for the lead, and then they will reshare what Janae does as far as if it's something that applies district-wide. They do, and then Janae is all the time working with the contacts and sending out messaging about, okay, this is coming up, what about this? You might want to do a video for this, that kind of thing. So,
But that's an
I
interesting
asked,
concept.
yeah, well, yes. I asked because I did meet with a parent and I was very confident. I was like, oh, no, we absolutely share when the progress reports and the report cards are coming out. Everyone should know that's on social media. She's like, no, that's not true. I'm like,
it was actually today. We see it, I saw it today.
so
Yeah.
I don't think that we should micromanage anybody, right?
Right.
Especially with them having so much to do, but these are things that can be scheduled also and kind of automated. So I wonder if district-wide, there should be like, these are the things that you should be sharing and give folks more direction, especially those folks who are kind of falling behind. They just may not know what to do.
That's the intent of these communications audits, working
Yeah.
one-on-one, and really listening to the principal to say, this is where I think we need help, and maybe we're not shining, but then we can also learn best practices from schools that are doing it really well as well, and then sharing it with other schools. So we will take that.
Toho High School
Is
Top
on
of the game.
social media, yeah. And they do really good with like social media graphics and stuff.
Yeah.
Other schools, they're not there yet. And so we have tools to help them. We can make them templates. We can do all sorts of things.
Yes.
So that is kind of where we're going, of taking each individual school and kind of working and trying to bolster.
That's a good point, though, to go, like, see, high schools, everybody needs a graduation date.
Yes.
Or just things that, it's more calendar type of things, or.
I mean, Dana's team does a lot of that, like, they put out when progress reports are going
Yeah.
out or reports and graduation rates. But some schools may, or some parents may follow their school, but not our district.
Yeah.
So I think there's
And
a lot
some
of
schools are better about resharing big stuff, and some schools aren't. Just like with anything, sometimes they're really good at social media, and sometimes they're just not. And so that's what we're trying to get in there to help and figure out. So we'll take that suggestion for sure.
Also, like when we had this year with the hurricanes, just some safety or school shutting down or opening back up, just that basic district, this is what's happening in real time, so.
Yeah.
Sherry, you want to?
If I can make one additional point about the social media, remember that there's different generations that use different platforms. So I don't know if all schools are on Instagram or whatever else people are using, but that parent age, those millennials and those Gen Zs are now the ones and Gen Zs does not use Facebook.
Right. We are on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. Again, we've given schools the autonomy to say we want to be on at least one. That's not an option. They have to be on at least one. But that's, again, part of the audit to say you're doing really good and maybe it's time to expand, or we need to help a little bit and figure out how to get you there. Maybe you haven't selected the right person to kind of do it, or if it's too much work, you feel it's too much work, maybe we need to create a team at your school to help and stuff. So that is part of what we're doing, yes. Thank you. Sherry, you want to talk about like next steps for student bonus?
So after I was able to share with the principals at Dr. Pace's meeting, I did have Paths reach out, and they would like to be a part of it. So that will be a school I will add next year. I really want to make sure that I work with especially with the middle schools. My next steps would be moving forward. It would have to be with support from the middle school team, because I learned the hard way going to one school where the school was able to provide support. It went really well. When going to the other school where they were not able to provide that much support due to just staff shortages, and it was just me by myself at times. That was a struggle. It's kind of hard to rein in middle schoolers and keep them focused without some direct guidance. So that would definitely.
You can adjust to that as well, right?
Yeah. So that would be another thing. Currently, when I go out to schools, I just meet with the students in 2 periods. I'm really looking at maybe next year doing at 3 periods, but then with the support of the assistant superintendents, to make it that it is more mandatory that the principal and the assistant principal attend that 3rd period so they can hear from the students right then. That is probably the biggest roadblock I'm seeing right now, is that I encourage the students to set up a time with their principals, and that's not happening. So they have all these great ideas and these great plans, but at quite a few of the schools, they're not able to get that time with the administrator, or maybe only one person's able to share with the administrator, or the adult shares. And I really want to have those students feel like they're valued, and we've done all this work, so I don't want them to see like, okay, you're coming in and telling us we can do all this stuff, and then nothing happens with it. So that's my biggest concern, and then probably to just go out twice a year then, and just so that I'm trying not to pull them from class as much as little as possible, but to try to get as much accomplished as I can. And I partner with USF. They're a great partner with us. They support us with our PBS project, and so they've been great to just have as input and getting the word out, and we've been able to share at some conferences. We're actually going to a conference in March, and we were able to partner with community relations. So Janae came out, which was amazing, and videotaped some of our students because it's kind of hard to take students out of town to a conference. So this way they'll be able to be there, but just their voice will be heard, because a lot of times when attendees come to a conference, it's great to hear from us, but they'd really rather hear from the students. So this way, the students will be able to share how student voice has impacted them and their thoughts and ideas, so.
Brennan, you want to talk about next
Sure,
steps?
sure. We talked a little bit about continuing to develop the choice pathways and programming at the elementary schools, which we've got some big ideas happening right now. We want to further collaborate with our CTE department to establish the exploratory career programming at the middle schools, specifically using Paxton Patterson labs. And the point of this is so that the middle schools have an exploratory program that doesn't require a teacher that is certified in that field outside of education. That has been a big challenge for us right now, to keep certified educators in those specialized programs. This will take that requirement away, but will be very focused on the specific pathway that they're exploring at the middle school level. For example, at Discovery, we're looking at the Paxton Patterson Lab kit that would go into Discovery Middle School, which would be an exploratory, something that we would think of as, when we went to school, as shop class, that would then prepare them to feed into potentially the Poinciana High School construction project. So they wouldn't have to have somebody from the outside industry to be the certified person in that course. And it eliminates the district from having to piecemeal resources and develop curriculum, where this is high-quality curriculum that can be delivered with intention at each of the middle schools. So that is definitely planned for a different pathway for each of the middle schools. And then they also have it's even more exploratory at the elementary level, so that they can start aligning to what their career survey says from Zello, to try out a few different things. And so we're looking to expand that with our choice pathways at the elementary level. Where I mentioned developing and expanding the use of the Zello career survey results to really look at the students' results and what are their interests, and then deliver some of that content that is aligned to their interests as well. And then we want to enhance the choice fair with additional student-led interactive opportunities to show the competitive options that are out there across our schools, and also to highlight the feeder patterns. We had the opportunity to also attend the JA Inspire Career Exploration for 8th graders. And so we're going to kind of take a hybrid form of our traditional choice fair and some of that career JA Inspire, and bring a little more excitement to the choice fair for next school year in our planning. And then expand social media marketing of the competitive choice programs across the district, specifically to enhance the areas of our district that have the greatest need, and to continue to attract our homeschool, family empowerment, and even our charter students, because we do have 15% of our students are in choice, and we have another between those three other programs, another 30% of our students are in charter, family empowerment, or homeschool.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The program at Discovery, did you involve the teacher from the high school? Was he involved in that?
We have been working together with our CTE friends, and they have been working together.
So just to add to that, we're putting a lab like that in every middle school. So the county gave us a manufacturing grant for Liberty, and Discovery added a construction part of their own with the funding that they're getting from Choice to coordinate that with the construction. And that's the only 2 or 3 labs in construction that are available with those facts and patterns of lab. So they all will look the same across the school district, except Discovery's gonna have the construction one that matches with Mr. Inwood's.
But did you involve Mr. Inwood in that process?
We did not, because they only have 3 options that we could buy to keep those labs, and we bought all 3 of them.
It might be a good idea, because the only reason that we would even consider putting that lab at that school is because of his program. And the only reason that his program is successful is because of him. So, because we've tried it at other schools and it hasn't worked, right? And his is jam-packed.
We don't have those labs anywhere else, they're brand new.
Right, that construction program at PHS they tried to replicate that program at other schools though.
Yes.
Right? And it hasn't worked well. Right? So while he has a waiting list, we might want to take whatever expertise he has to offer to ensure that we're not throwing money down the drain in buying those 3 labs, because it's a leadership thing more than anything else in his classroom. If you've been in his classroom and you've observed him, you can see why there's a waiting list to get into his class. And he's in drop.
Because one thing I want to acknowledge on a separate issue is that I do appreciate the fact that we have middle and high school orientations early in the year. You know, not just right before school starts, because a lot of times people have to plan, especially if we're doing all these feeder programs and these choice programs. I'm thinking that's something that maybe you can attach to, because this year, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to go to the orientation, so I don't know who was all a part of that orientation. But if the choice program can attach to that and kind of educate parents on what are the possibilities of that specific school that they're going to, because sometimes we could talk about district level choice schools, but to be honest with you, I don't want to move a student all the way from Celebration all the way down to St. Cloud, because we gotta transport them. That's not very efficient, you know what I mean? So if we could kind of promote the choice schools in that specific region, because even school board members, even county commissioners now, everyone wants to do a backpack drive. You know, that's the other thing too, is, again, attaching to things that already exist. So if I'm gonna do a backpack drive this year, it'd be nice to have staff there and kind of, that's that opportunity to kind of engage, those parents, and every time there's a county commissioner or a school board member doing something of that nature, of like a town hall or something like that they can kind of get in there and get them.
Yes, we will. I'm taking note on that to add that to the regular orientations, but just for your information, we had informational nights at all of the magnet high schools, which used to be a cluster informational night, and they all would share for 5 minutes about their program. And we dismantled that this year on the voice of the administrators and the families. They asked, can we get to know our schools a little bit better? So they did individual information nights at every one of their schools and had to highlight their programs, and had the most turnout that they've ever had, and wonderful feedback. And even Jeff Schwartz at Point Santa High School said, I can't believe it. We even had parents from Harmony and St. Cloud that came to look at our business academy.
Right. So there's 2 more things that I'd like to see on this community engagement goals for the student. We're actually doing pretty good, but I just don't know it. We get quite a few parental complaints that come directly to our emails. And one thing I can say is they might not get the answer they want, but they are getting some feedback. And I think that has value for us to look at and say, hey, we've gotten 100, parental complaints this year, and we've been able to satisfy them, or we responded back to them a certain amount of time. I don't know how to measure that metric, but that's something that I think that when we talk about community engagement, when parents, because what happens is, a lot of times when they call me directly, because as elected officials, we have this communication with parents directly too, but a lot of times I tell them, hey, use the system. And I don't want them to feel intimidated that when they use the system, they're not getting responded to. Because responded to doesn't mean getting the answer they want, because what they want may not be practical, but at least getting some kind of engagement with them. And I think that we've been actually pretty good at that, if we were to actually measure that. Because I've seen emails like this the other day. I had Dr. Allen, a parent complain. I was like, hey, Dr. Allen, this is a middle school kid. And he was like, okay. And we're getting back to that. I think that has value. So I don't know how to measure
The
that.
expectation is that we respond to all emails within 24 hours. And Dana is able to monitor and does monitor on a regular basis any of the information requests, concerns, questions that come in through Let's Talk. And so we can observe whether or not those have been responded to, whether they haven't, and her team will follow up with individual schools or departments to say, hey, this one's been pending for 2 days. make sure somebody responds.
We also, as part of Let's Talk, and again, things don't have to go through Let's Talk, but anything that does go through Let's Talk, we actually get a customer service score as part of that.
Mine's very
And
low because they don't like my answers.
well, sometimes they don't like our answers, so that they'll give us lower, but a lot of times it's thank you for responding so fast or quickly or listening. And we can, when we close the dialogue, because it's been handled, they are sent a little survey, little one-question survey, and then we have a customer service score that we're always watching.
So like an NPS score?
I don't know what NPS is. Okay.
Net promoter, but I mean.
Okay, it's a
lower
customer
than-
service score,
Yeah.
and they get to rate the service. And again, sometimes it's low because they don't like what the answer is, but that's not the intent. The intent is, were you provided good customer service as far as getting a response back within our time frame, that kind of stuff.
What's the question that they're getting?
I'll have to double check, but I think it's our, how satisfied were you with your experience with Let's Talk?
Are
and
we
your
able to change that question? And I'm not trying
Yeah.
to skew the numbers. It's just because we have to give whatever answer is the correct answer, so they don't like that. Maybe we
Correct.
should be measuring something else. That's all.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about. We can put that in the strategic plan. I didn't even know that existed, that we can measure that. Because if we're not measuring it, they can say, hey, we want a good response rate, or we want to respond within 48 hours, or we want the survey to be 60% happy people, or something like that.
Or let's talk, yeah.
Or forever, so.
I'll email you the data that we have right now, and Let's Talk as far as what's your score. It gives us what is the average amount of response time as well. So there are several things that we can monitor within that system.
Since Mr. Melendez mentioned earlier, when it came to behavior and by school, can you give it to us by school too? 'Cause-
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
One more thing
And
before-
department.
Before I know we're getting into the details here. So we prepare the kids pre-K, early literacy, move them through. As a parent, I can say I have a senior and a junior, and it's been so key for me as a first-time parent having a senior, having those parent nights and engagement at the high school from the beginning of the year. And it's been not just choice, but how do you fill out the FAFSA? What is your plan after high school? Because then you're tagged, okay, parent, you're it on your own. And it is I can tell you, and I'm in the education system, it is complicated. When you leave as a senior, and if you don't have that engagement with the parents and community in that process too, we can't leave our seniors and our high schoolers, but I just appreciate the efforts that our guidance counselors, our career staff have been doing at the high schools on top of extra things. Even, I can in particular talk about our school real quickly, is that for the Remind text, we sign up for the year they graduate. And that Remind rolls over every year, so I don't have to re-sign up. And I'm getting class of 2022, 24, whatever that it is. And that push out of information has been so key for us as parents. I just want
Thank you for that. Mr. Cook has done a phenomenal job, and we are continually trying to ensure that his messaging and the college and career messaging is getting out to the right folks.
But those parent
That's
nights,
Yep.
parents.
But I love that
come,
idea,
they
though.
do.
Yes.
What Ms. Booth is saying is 100% correct. Like a senior orientation. Just like our orientations, it's not just like, a senior orientation. Boom, the beginning of the year, the parents go with the seniors that freshman year, or whatever high school they go to, and they let them know, hey, this is what to expect this year. Almost create like a checklist for them. I mean, they may not want to go to college, but if they want to, that checklist is there. How to apply for a school. You can apply for more than one school. You're not going to get gigged if you get accepted to 3, or just whatever the case is. I love that idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then last thing is, last thing is committees. We talk about community engagement. We have a lot of, community volunteer activity committees, but they're not here. You know what I mean? So it's like, is the attendance? What is the feedback? Maybe a survey on them. Do you enjoy being on your committee? Do you feel like your voice is being heard? Do you feel like your recommendations of the committee are being brought forth to the school board? So if we want the community involved, we do have committees like the Audit Advisory Committee, we have Business Advisory Board, we have, hopefully we can do like an ESE one or that involves the community engagement. But if we're not measuring it and putting it in our strategic plan, then
Since that is now part of the Parent Bill of Rights, I know that John Boyd did a great job of linking all of those things in that. Is there a page for Parent Bill of Rights and then there's links? Love that, but also that should that could be part of some of the communication strategies is how can you get involved? One of the things that I liked during COVID that hasn't transferred over, and I get why, is that some schools were streaming SAC and PTA meetings. Like I would just get on my phone at work and I was able to see that, and that's not something that's happening now. So, and I think there was some kind of statute reason, but that statute reason has since dissolved. Like they can still do that.
They gave us permission during COVID for SAC committee meetings, PTA meetings to be held virtually. That changed.
Yes, but it wasn't exactly that.
But
It
I
was
don't
streaming.
think there's any, well, but that was how anybody and everybody could engage, right?
Because the people were, yes, but like maybe even after that, or maybe this was before COVID. I don't remember. I know this was at OXA. Like they were in the meeting and they were streaming the meeting. Like I was at work watching a SAC meeting. It was via social media.
Look at it.
We can look at it, yeah.
So I'm asking because we do ask, at least this board seems to be very interested in expanding pathways for parents to be involved. And there are parents who work and want to be involved, but they just can't. So I wonder if there's like a different way, like on demand, maybe this could be stored somewhere that they can watch later. The parents can participate, even if it is remotely, to some of these meetings.
Maybe it's not as a voting body in
Yeah,
but
of
just
course,
to see it
right.
to be informed.
I
And I think
understand.
that's the
Yeah, they
limitation
can't
is
be
the
a
voting.
member of the voting body
Yeah.
anymore.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, got it. Anything else? Goal 14, thank you so much. It is 10 o'clock, so just wanted to be mindful. This has been great discussion. If for any reason we're delayed, we'll figure it out. Okay. That brings up goal 3, fiscal responsibility. And while we only have room for a few people up at the table, I can assure you that everybody in this room is contributing to the work in more than one way. As you can see, there's already been a lot of overlap between our goals.
All right, you guys know I can go as fast as you want me to go, so. Just a little recap for those of you guys who weren't here when we initiated this year's strategic plan. The goal statement for Goal 3 fiscal responsibility is to utilize all district resources efficiently to enhance the learning environment for successful future-ready graduates and ensure financial sustainability. So we kind of structured this goal in 2 main areas. We lumped our activities into long-term financial sustainability and then digital transformation initiatives. So everything kind of falls into those 2 buckets. I did want to start out today just by talking about the first bullet point that we added on here, because I think this is really where we are at this point of the year. This wasn't necessarily baked into the strategic plan at the beginning of the year, but I think it's the most important thing right now, is this focus on reprioritizing our operational dollars to maybe potentially move away from some things that aren't highest priority and free dollars up for compensation, which I know is a big goal of the board as we move forward. So let's think about everything with that lens. But we will go through and give you some updates on what we've accomplished in Goal 3. So we are doing program evaluations on several of the curriculum programs now, and one of the biggies was the one-to-one tutoring program. So that was a successful program evaluation that allowed us to bring forward the recommendation to continue expanding that program. We have
Yes,
percentage.
for the actual one-to-one program itself, we are tracking on a weekly basis the number of devices that have been distributed to our students. And as you know, our students are constantly withdrawing and enrolling and so on. But currently, we're at 96.03% as of last week. And the percentage of those devices being used in the classroom, we're able to track through NetRef, which is our classroom management system, is 98.34%.
As far as student computer refresh, we have allocated funding in the capital plan for that. And when we embarked on this one-to-one digital device initiative, obviously the big forward-thinking issue was that it would have to be sustainable. So how are we going to continue to plan and budget and fund the sustainability of our one-to-one initiative? So that is captured both within the ESSER and ARP funds, which we're using while we have them temporarily, but then long-term in our capital budget.
we have stages of refresh that will occur. So when the pandemic first hit, we had a certain number of computers which we deployed. As you're aware, that was about 17,000 at that time, and since then we've built up that number. So those 17,000 are certain years old and have to become refreshed at some point. So we're tracking those as we go along.
I guess there's a quick question to that. It's more academic based than that, because I appreciate the one-to-one. What percentage of the curriculum did we change the cups to include digital devices? Since we have digital devices everywhere, did we sit there and say, okay, so much of the teaching has to have like an application that helps bring the program to life or something like that, or the class to life? You know what I mean?
And
are we using these devices to the extent that they can be?
So-
Just because they have them is one thing.
So that's being built up as we go. You know, there wasn't a switch that we flipped and we were 100% digital at that point, but we're building it up. And the tool that we're using for that is Canvas. That's our learning management system within the classroom.
My middle schoolers and high schooler use their devices every single day, so.
I know that there was, oh, so sorry.
And I was just going to say, the green shirts are more a part of Goal 1 than Goal 3, but it all goes together. And they have been very strategic in their in-schools 1 day a week, supporting teachers in the effective use of technology for teaching and engaging students, not just delivering information. So it's not just like instead of putting the PowerPoint on the whiteboard or the smart board, they put it on the device. It's how do we get kids to actively engage? And I am seeing it strategically in the classrooms that I visit.
Like one of them could be like submitting assignments online, so that they can learn how to save the name of the file, do an email. I mean, that's not really high school students, but like elementary school students, that's like a nice skill to have.
So we track the deployment of our green shirts and what they're doing on a weekly basis. So for example, we track how the green shirts are helping with brainstorming and consulting, whether they're attending PLC meetings at the school, doing small group PD, for example. So we're tracking all of that based on the number of green shirts that we have and where they're at and what school at what time. So we try to get them involved at every school. And I know the principals are very grateful for that.
I'm going to ask every school one. So does every school have a network tech right now working and not on
Currently, we
the
do.
green shirt side?
Correct. So every green shirt is paired with a computer technician or a
Correct.
school tech. Those school techs were gathered under the IT division 2 years ago when we implemented the one-to-one readiness plan. So that was part of that. So high schools typically have 2, some middle and K-8s have 2, depending on what the number of students are enrolled. So we try to base it on that. Every elementary school has 1.
It's a big job.
And they do work hand in hand together, for sure. And they also work with the library media specialists too.
Thank you. Before we move out of the one-to-one initiative, I do have a question around how we are working perhaps with safety and security to ensure that we have best practices for protecting our students and staff online from the bad guys.
Yes, ma'am. So as you're aware, we have a network and information security team that was also part of the one-to-one readiness plan. And that team is following what's called the NIST best standards. That's what we're trying to implement here in conjunction with the state of Florida. So that we're on parallel tracks with them, for what they're doing as well as what we're doing internally. So we're going to follow those best standards, those NIST standards. And we follow recommendations from CISA, which is a cybersecurity institute run by the federal government. So we're following those standards also. So we have, just to be real quick about this, we have a Palo Alto firewall that protects us from dangerous IP addresses and preventing our students from going there and our staff. We also have Content Keeper that looks at searches. And then we have Gaggle also internally, which you're aware of too. So we have various layers of protection throughout the district currently. Does
Do we
that
do random
stop
audits?
everything? No.
Do we do random audits though? Like look at the browsing histories, just random checks, make
do.
sure nobody gets through?
We do.
Yeah.
We do. So we also use another application, which I'm not going to mention,
Okay.
that also warns us if there's a 0-day attack And that's something that's brand new that no one else is aware of, but looks suspicious. It warns us of that. So we investigate it.
And I believe at our next meeting, we have a security
We do,
executive
on the
session.
21st.
Half of that will be related to physical safety and security
Got it.
questions, and the other half an hour will be cybersecurity.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, so there's some things I will mention and some I won't, so.
Okay. Moving on to some compensation items. So we did do the staff retention supplements that were paid out this past fall. And that was a little over $6 million that we funded out of the ESSER and ARP dollars. We do have that offer on the table again, now for the spring semester right now, as you guys are aware of. And there is potential, as long as we continue to have these ARP dollars, there's some more potential in that area. So as far as compression that's occurred as a result of the $15 minimum wage, in the salary packages for the current year that ESP and Teamsters are currently under and had agreed to, we did start to chip away a little bit at the compression issue by tiering those salary schedules. So we've started, but there's a lot more work to do in that area, and the proposals that we'll be working on to move forward for next year will include aspects of compression. And then in the healthcare area, we switched our third-party administrator on October 1, moving away from Aether to EBMS. That transition went very smoothly. We have not heard very many complaints at all about our new provider, a lot of good feedback. So, and we are still doing the run-out with Aether, but that will all be phased out very soon. Annual energy savings generated $335,000 from some of the high-performance building initiatives that facilities has worked on. And then moving into Kronos and payroll, we implemented most of our non-exempt staff as of October 1. We are now, we can talk about it next steps, but we're working on getting transportation and the bus drivers implemented.
We've also updated our payroll procedures to include those new timekeeping processes. So we're realizing efficiencies from that. Going into security again, we didn't talk about this earlier, but we do have phishing campaigns that are ongoing. So we track click rates and reply rates. So that's what we're tracking there with our KnowBe4 software. We have implemented multi-factor authentication for our Office 365 environment. And then there's more about that on next steps. And we, again, are looking at ROI for software renewals. So we're tracking all the renewals of our software through the software committee. And we have gone to a 5-year look back to make sure that those vendors are complying with their original stated goals. And also that they have not made any software changes that we're not aware of. So what we're finding is a number of these vendors who may have had locally sourced servers and software in the United States are now moving things out of the United States. So we have to be very careful about that and make sure that we either contractually or in some other way urge them to come back and comply with FERPA.
Just 1 minute. So you said there's software review committee.
Yes, ma'am.
And I could be brought up to speed on that. So the software review committee, who is that part of? Do you survey teachers, staff? Who is on kind of the committee breakout?
Right. So there are folks from obviously information technology on that committee, curriculum and instructions on that committee, purchasing's on that committee, legal services. So when a software request comes through or a renewal, we go through a very detailed process. We actually have an Adobe form that we route to everyone for approval, and we go through each step, and each department then decides whether it's appropriate or not. So we do rely heavily on curriculum instruction to say, hey, this software is very important for the classroom, which could have been initiated by a teacher, for example.
Right.
We have that all the time. And then it kind of goes up through their chain of command and reaches us for approval. We meet officially once a month, but we can approve something at any time during the month to make it more efficient.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yes, ma'am.
In terms of teacher input, we have been practicing small pilots of anything that we might potentially want to introduce. For example, Zello, Beable. Before we implement it, we've had to work with a small group to get the feedback from teachers.
One of the big things that really helps with that committee is a reduction in duplication of software and reduction of duplication. So that's a big deal because we don't want to be spending money on something multiple times, although it's coming from different vendors, right?
Input.
Yes.
So that's great. Thank you.
Where was I?
But, and then the second to last bullet point is about our electronic payment rebate program. So we started about 6-7 years ago. Some of you may not know that in our accounts payable department, for everything that's PO based, we also have the opportunity to actually, instead of cutting a check, to actually make that payment electronically. And so we have specific payment cards that aren't out in the field, but that are in our accounts payable department that we're paying our bills with and generating rebate revenue. So last year we were about 665,000, 673. So we've stabilized a little bit, but that is non-restricted dollars that are part of our general fund and are budgeted. So, and then lastly, for our progress points, our small business and veteran program that we started this year. Katrina Ponzini, Katrina, do you want to stand up? I just want to make sure everybody knows who you are and what you're busy doing. So Katrina has been an absolute rock star trying to get this program started from the ground up. She's been working with some of our outside attorneys that Frank brought in to help with this. And we have a kickoff event, an open house on March 8th here at the district office. Already getting a lot of community involvement. She's been out and about in various meetings, various events. So I think that's going well, but obviously a lot of next steps still to come as we continue to ramp up that program.
I've heard feedback from some small businesses in the community, and they said props to you for the efforts from you and your team in making sure they're aware of things, so thank you.
Just recently, I think, the days we're pushing together, the St. Cloud Chamber Young Professionals, they recruited other businesses to come, and I know it was a stop on their scavenger hunt was to come see, so that was impressive, so thank you.
And then we can move on to next steps. I did just want to mention, one thing we didn't really have in our bullet points here is about the ESSER and ARP dollars. We do have a budget workshop coming up on March 21st, and so we'll do a much deeper dive into an update on that during that workshop. So next steps, again, we're in the process of starting to develop salary proposals for the upcoming year. And obviously, we'll go through the bargaining process there. Again, just a little bit of a budget update. The governor's budget did come out the other day. I'm sure you guys have all seen the updates in the headlines. With the expansion of the voucher program, the increase in FRS rates, and the increase in per student funding that's being recommended, don't anticipate a lot of new money. So whatever we are able to and looking to do for compensation will need to come from kind of internally reprioritizing our resources. We also want to continue to look at our health plan and make some changes there as we continue to expand and move forward with what we've done here in Osceola and building our own health plan from the ground up. You've all seen those recommendations, which have also been presented to the union at this point, and we are waiting on feedback from our benefits committee that'll be meeting again next week. So we'll continue moving forward with those processes. Our health plan consultant, who we are under contract with he is currently working on HIPAA engagement, which came as a result of our previous RSM recommendations. So we are in compliance with HIPAA, but there's some things in terms of policies and procedures and documentation that we're really working on nailing down, and education throughout the whole organization. IT specifically has a big part in that. And then also we have him now starting on a claims audit. Have another kickoff meeting with Aether later this week. to make sure that we really have a chance to dig into that before the run-out period ends. Another next step in that area is establishing a data warehouse specific to our health services plan. We have been looking into that. We identified 2 potential companies and did kind of an informal solicitation. I believe that's where we are still stuck at the moment.
Waiting
is
for feedback from those
that-
two
What are we
from those
talking
two
about,
companies.
data warehouse? Is that like the patient records and storing the records and stuff like that, or what exactly?
So potentially all claims information. If you remember when we were back with Cigna and trying to move away, there was a big struggle about us owning the data and not being able to get it. So we want to be set up now where we have access to everything that's ours.
So we're not just talking like the in-clinic things, the ones that are by third-party providers. So Heather wants to go to a doctor, it's a pediatrician, not at the district, somewhere else, that we're getting access to that data too? And the doctor's gonna want to share that information with us and give it to us?
Well, it's not the doctors. It's information that already exists through our third-party administrator.
like pharmacy
Yeah,
claims.
Frank, do you want to speak to?
Following Cigna, when we transferred over, Cigna would not give us claims files which contained the treatments and patient records that were paid for, which delayed the new doctors from even being able to transition rapidly to properly take care of patients. So we started a process with Ather that's culminating now in this process, that every claim made, so the claim gets submitted with all the data, is also independently, it's already owned by us, but it's independently maintained where we have access at any time. And when we say we have access, nobody has access in the organization unless the superintendent, there's like 3 sign-off people that have to approve access, which would really only arise if we were in litigation. There's no reason for us to be going through.
So all it
files.
is just storage. Why can't we
Correct.
just throw a rack
That's what
on
we're
something?
doing in a
That's what
secure
we're gonna do.
place.
So it doesn't have to be like a
To be
complicated
clear,
plan.
we're not building anything from an IT point of view, other than we will spin up space in our Azure environment, cloud environment, where we will keep a copy of that data.
Okay, so I'm like, this isn't gonna be that big, it's just storing information. So we gotta protect it, make sure nobody
Right.
gets
But we
into
do
it.
need a third party who can bring that stuff together and do all the building of the data warehouse if anything has to be done. But we're not building anything internally, so other than keeping a copy of the data, that's it.
I really
Raw
wanna
data
emphasize
and
over and over again, nobody has access to this data.
it'll be very,
So nobody in this organization could independently go look at anyone's data.
The next thing on here is analyzing the administrative office space and other ancillary spaces. So we can kind of work that into our strategic plan this year. But this admin complex is kind of bursting at the seams, as well as some of our other ancillary facilities throughout the district. So we are starting to think about, and certainly open to feedback, some longer-term options for what we do for administrative space. I know one of the big ideas that's been thrown out there is maybe creating a new warehouse in a different location and then repurposing our warehouse space over here in Building 2000 for administrative offices. We have not moved forward with that plan, but that's just an example of some of the brainstorming that's going on to address. As we continue to grow, we're going to have to.
We got HR, I don't even
Have
know where
some place to
HR
put
is, I
people.
got folks in 2 different places. I mean, it's almost to the point where I know it's expensive, but we almost need a building. You know what I mean? We need to actually have one building that has everybody in it, we have plenty of space here.
And something that the board may want to think about is, would it be appropriate to market this property to provide funds to build something someplace else? Because with OHP right across the road, and their expansion of hotels and things like that in this area in Neo City, it might be something that others
Yeah.
would be interested
And
in.
the thing is, we got excess property in some
But that's
places too, like
posting.
Hickory Tree has like 15 acres there or something like that, because it is a big project. That's, like we said, we had the Boys and Girls Club that we gave to them. But at some point, you're right, if we do need to do a huge building, and that's when we look at all of our inventory and kind of shut off some of those assets to help pay for like the down payment. And maintenance of that. Because I can see the value of having one big building rather than having, we even have staff at Ross Jeffries. That's the other thing is, if you're gonna consider that, we have to consider the big picture, like what is the goal with Ross Jeffries long-term? Do you wanna hold on to Ross Jeffries, or do you wanna build a building on Ross Jeffries itself, like knock it down and build it up? I don't know what you're allowed to do. But, we have a lot of assets in different places, and it's not the most efficient use of that asset.
I think the team agrees with that, and we don't have a specific next step in this area, so it's certainly something that we're gonna want board input as we move forward. What do you guys see as being the appropriate path forward?
I can speak on for me right now, today, in February, I need teachers in the classroom. And that's where my priority is right now, making sure that we're staffed fully in schools. But I see moving forward in a strategic plan, but we've got to take care of that.
Yes, totally agree. And from a financial perspective, in the past, it was never really the right time to focus our resources on ancillary and administrative. I do think with the continuation of the additional sales tax, we have some flexibility there to make sure that we are taking care of our schools, prioritizing our schools, but also not neglecting the growth needs in the administrative and ancillary areas as well. And then lastly, we already talked about continuing implementation of the Small Business Veteran Program. And then I'm going to turn it
Yes.
back over to Pete for the rest.
Yes, so for the digital transformation piece, we are knee-deep in all of these items. So Kronos Phase 2, again, that is bringing the bus drivers into our timekeeping system. We're actually getting ready to start a pilot for that, so very exciting. Doing multi-factor authentication for our VPN for administrators, and that is for the protection of our current ERP system, mostly. We're working on the district-wide business process mapping. That's been ongoing. I can happily say we've completed the entire payroll area, and we're now reaching out into other areas like accounts payable, work orders, and so on. So we're working on that.
And the timeline for that is to try and have everything mapped by the end of this calendar year?
That's the plan.
Okay, so we do have a project plan and a
Right.
timeline established.
And that segues into the next one. We do have a detailed project plan and timeline for the ERP replacement currently.
And I guess as the review committee too, gonna look at that and go, okay, because over time, terms only does so much. And a particular department may have bought a software program that they fell in love with, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Somebody has to make the
We
decision.
call that-
Do they get to keep that software program because it does something specific, or does it get integrated into the big?
We call those shadow systems. So we've identified a number of those. A lot of them are used in risk and benefits, for example, to track claims and things like that. So a decision will be made to replace those or make them part of the new ERP system requirements when we get to that phase.
Right.
So
A perfect example is was it Focus for School Grades. I kind of like that program, you know what I mean? So rather than ERP, I know ERP is not going to touch student information data, right?
Those are two separate systems.
Right.
The SIS, Student Information Systems, versus the ERP, which is primarily your finance and HR.
So our plan for this spring is to begin writing the RFP for the person who will be selected to write the RFP. So it's going to be a two-phased implementation there. So we'll identify someone who will not be able to bid on the actual replacement at all. All they're going to do is help us write it in a professional way, and then we will get that out in the next year. And we'll start doing that in earnest and looking for the replacement at that time. And we're holding money back, of course, if you want.
Yes, I know that was a board priority to make sure that we started allocating dollars on an annual basis so that when the time comes to purchase a major ERP system, we're not trying to fund that in 1 year. So in your current 5-year capital plan, we are allocating $5 million a year for the next 5 years. So that'll be in conjunction with this timeline, and we will have those dollars set aside when the time comes.
And that will be enough.
They should be, I hope. But that involves not just the software, but training and business process specialists or a business analyst will come in to help us in each area. So it should cover all that.
Any other feedback for goal 3, or are we ready to move on? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, team. Goal 2, step right up. Does anybody need a break, or are you okay?
don't stop. You can go.
Okay. Okay, this is our Goal 2 team, and again, there are other folks in the room who certainly contribute to this effort of recruiting, retaining, developing and retaining our people. This remains probably our biggest challenge in terms of what we're doing. And then, obviously Goal 1 academic success, we'll look at our mid-year results. Tammy Otterson, Chief Human Resource Officer. Angel Osterman is our coordinator of certification, and she's helping out with all of that. Janice Franceschi, Director of Professional Development. And then Megan is in charge of our mentoring program with working with the New Teacher Center. And as Mrs. Booth said, our priority is trying to get people in the classroom. It remains a challenge.
Absolutely.
Tammy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pace. I will follow after my fellow goal leads to talk about our goal statement, which is champion a culture that attracts success and develops and retains quality employees committed to serving successful, future-ready graduates. And as a part of that, we have 3 subsections in regards to recruiting, developing, and retaining. We are struggling like every district in really the United States of America in finding talent. One thing that I really want to point out is a huge struggle for all of us is you'll see that 40% of our teachers are classified as alternative certification teachers. So that's why it's so important for us to have that development of our staff, which Janice will talk about in mentoring with Megan. And recruitment is our top priority, and we have worked very hard to turn over rocks, look under palmetto bushes, whatever we can do. And I think we've even led the charge on some of our J-1 visa programs. A lot of the counties around the state, you'll hear them now talking about, they're talking to J-1 visa vendors. So without further ado, I'm going to let Angel take over to talk about our recruitment.
Okay, thank you. Talent management has had to take a step back this year, and as we say, look outside the box and then further outside the box. We realized that we needed to facilitate better opportunities for our candidates and administrators to interact and connect in the most convenient way possible. Everybody's time is valuable and everyone has limited time. Last year, we implemented the Why Osceola Recruit campaign. It was launched last year to share the voice of current teachers and staff members as to why they call Osceola home. We've noticed a trend this year in teachers that left last year that are returning back to Osceola. We showcased a principal and a couple of teachers last year to let them tell the community why they choose Osceola as their home. This year, we had 872 instructional new hires. 39 of those were new J-1 visa teachers. We do have 22 current J-1 visa teachers that will finish their time with us this year, and they'll go back to their home country. And we're planning a week of interviews for our principals for the new group of J-1 visa teachers that are coming in. And as Tammy shared, we do have 40% of our teachers that are alt-cert teachers. And for those that don't understand what an alt-cert teacher is, it's someone that did not go to school for education. So they might have a degree in business, a degree in psychology, so they're coming in and they're having to do everything that an education major would have to do, alongside teach, pass the state requirements, and prepare for their students.
Angela, I think we're also speeding up or expediting or moving forward that recruitment of other J-1 teachers.
Yes, Diana has that planned for February 16th, 14th. Yes.
February 14th and 16th.
Yes. So we're starting that week. So the principal.
We want to start that early because that's the challenge sometimes with our J-1 teachers is it takes them a little while to get their plans made to come over. So we want them to try to get them here at the first of school.
And that's why, just to compliment, Tammy Otterson, I saw on the board agenda today, and I spoke to her at the last board event at Osceola Chamber. Recruiting from Puerto Rico is critical too, because those are U.S. citizens. They don't have to worry about the whole J-1 process. If whatever one you get poached there, they can immediately become, well, not immediately, they probably have to do something, but it's not the hurdle of going through a J-1 visa.
And we've had such success with that we're sending a second group this year with the board's approval.
We are proud to announce that 79 school-related support staff employees, and 61 substitutes were promoted to instructional positions. We challenged our principals to look within their staff and doing their stay interviews and talking with them to see who on staff might be interested in becoming a teacher. So that created those numbers. So we were very happy with the responses that we received. So this year, we've decided to create a new event. Last year, we did a one-year week, teacher interview week for principals to interview applicants. So this year, we're doing what we're calling Interview Palooza. Everyone's busy schedules, we figured this would be a bit better for everyone. We'll start mid-February. We're going to continue through the beginning of April. We would like to have it wrapped up before our transfer fair on April 19th. The candidates that apply for the positions will be pre-screened for certification eligibility. The schools can interview the candidates. Conditional offers will be made to those candidates deemed a good fit for our schools. And then when we figure out specific jobs and formal offers, those will be made sometime in May to any of those candidates that were interviewed. And as Mr. Melendez just mentioned, Diana has coordinated our Puerto Rico recruiting events for talent management. From July 2022 to this January, she's conducted 12 information sessions. 6 were in English and 6 were in Spanish. We had 923 interested parties register. 537 of them reside in Puerto Rico, and then 40 reside in countries outside of the U.S. Anyone that registers for the event, whether they attend or not, receive Diana's information on how to become a teacher, how to follow up, are you interested in coming to work with us? So they still get the information from us, as well as what Diana puts out on social media to let them know about the event. We have 55 already registered for our next event that's coming up.
Can I just go back?
Sure.
Do you mind if I go?
No, go ahead.
Just with regards to the 79 support staff to instructional, is there there's a support system for them to be able to?
Yes, that's where our mentors come into place, as well as if they're in an majority of them are with ESE, they're going from ESE support to an ESE teacher, and I believe the ESE department kind of like adopts them and helps them with what they need to get further along in their process.
And I don't.
School, I'm sorry, just
Sure.
coming from like the school, we knew as the culture, as our staff, who, even outside of, who was going through the program, so we could just offer them encouragement as a staff member whenever we could. What do you need? We can help you. And so.
And we also have PDCP, which we usually recommend that they do because they are alt-cert educators, and Justin and his team kind of nurture them and hold their hand along the way through the process.
Kind of related to that, and I don't know if you'll answer it later, so I was like looking to see what the talking points are, but is I know that we have a lot of support staff that holds a teaching certificate but isn't necessarily in the classrooms. I feel like we've talked about this before, maybe even in the board meetings, I'm not sure where. But are we auditing those teachers to see if we can bring them back into the classroom to fill some of those positions? They're already here.
Diana keeps in contact with most of them. We do have some of them that are out there with master's degrees. And a lot of them are not comfortable in the English language, so they're still not ready to come into the classroom. But in working with Tim and the ALCO group, we are creating the classes for them to come and get better, improve their English skills so that they feel better in the classroom.
I mean, in general, not just, some of the instructional staff that's not teaching, that are doing other things in the district, is that the main reason? Because they're not comfortable in the classroom?
Some of the ones that we have that have come here from different countries and so forth, when we get to looking at them and we realize they've got a master's degree or they're a para in a classroom with an elementary degree or teaching certificate, we try to follow up to see. A lot of times I'll pick up the phone and call the principal and say, do you know you got a para set in a classroom that has elementary certification?
No, I don't think that's what I mean.
Okay.
I mean
That's
teachers
interesting.
who have already taught in this district, who have gone to do other things.
Some of them have had to do it for
Like our green shirt
certifications.
people, is that what you're
Green
talking
shirts, they're doing other things that are not classroom related, which is great. However, they are teachers, and we have a teacher shortage. So I'm wondering if there's a strategy around that. Have we, Dr. Pace?
Yeah,
that's what's happening
Second
right
semester, we have deployed 31 of those non-classroom instructional personnel to fill vacancies in the schools.
Yeah.
And we have 78 district leaders, resource teachers, and staff members providing small group instruction. It's in Bill 1, page 29.
Okay,
So
we'll
we'll
get
talk
that.
more about that.
Perfect.
But-
Thank
But
you.
yeah, we identified that, yes, the job that you're doing, green shirts, resource teachers,
There's some in this room, I think.
Yeah.
Some in this
Yes.
room.
Teaching and
Raise
classroom.
your, raise your hand, I know this one, that one.
Sherry,
I've talked
we're
about
at
raise your
our
hand if you've been
PBIS
out there
specialist
doing
is
the
teaching
show.
reading
Yeah.
for 3
Feel it.
periods a
Yeah.
day. So we just said we've got to prioritize the needs of our
Oh, I'm
students.
so excited to hear more about that.
So we'll talk about that in the other one.
Yeah.
We've got to do that.
Good, okay, great.
Can I ask a question? For these alternative certifications, does this include people who are teaching out of field right now?
Sometimes, yes, they have a lot of requirements. The state continues to add requirements to certification, and I think that's one of our biggest barriers. A lot of times, our teachers don't have the funds to continue to keep taking tests. You know, what we offer is free coursework. We have PDCP, which is why we recommend it, because it's more affordable. But every time they take a subject area exam, it's $150.
Yeah.
So they don't pass it. You know, there's the discouragement, plus you got to take it again. You've got to pay to take your general knowledge. You've got to pay to take your professional ed. I think there's a lot of barriers that affect that, but most of them are alt-cert are out of field as well.
So, I mean, they only have a year to be out of field, right? So how is that going to put us next year when all these teachers that we've been throwing around?
We do have the option of a waiver. The superintendent is allowed to issue a one-time waiver, and we did some last year that we presented. And I think we did it for extenuating circumstances based on the teacher shortage. And we did check with our auditor before we did that to see, and there's other districts that are having to do the same thing, but that really only gives them,
Yeah.
and they can never have a waiver again. It's just like being out of field.
How are we following that trajectory to make sure that, I mean, what's going to happen at the end? Are they going to leave? Is it people who don't want to be in their field? Or is it just the fact that we are so strapped for bodies that they're everywhere? And
A lot of
so what does
times
that mean?
it seems like the ones that have a psychology degree, so they go and get social science, but they want to teach elementary. They can't pass the elementary test, or they can't pass like a middle grades test, so they have to go back in field. Well, social studies teachers are all over the place, so it's very disheartening in the certification side of the world, but we try to place them in field, because there are other things that they can teach. Research works for any subject area. There's certain ones of our computer-based classes that they can do. So we do work with the schools to try to find a place to put them, but that is a hindrance when they're only allowed that 1 year for out of field.
But Megan's mentoring work is also super important, so that they feel more successful in the classroom. They feel like they're not all alone, so they can work through it. And part of our mentoring is also talking to them about certification requirements. But Angel did share some data with me this morning. We currently have 198 teachers who have a certification expiring in 2023. That's June 30 of 2023. 31 of those are professional, 5-year certificates, so they just need to go through the process of submitting their professional learning points. Hopefully they've earned them, they've been given every opportunity. We have 9 who have completed their basic requirements, but they're waiting to pass the professional exam. We have 9 who've completed all of the requirements, and they just need to submit the application for certification, which is $250? $75. But 21 of those 198 need everything. They need coursework, they need tests, all before June 30. So Angel is sending them regular reminders. She's notifying our principals, these people need XYZ on your staff. Please make sure that you're talking to them about what is their plan, what are they doing to get there. Because otherwise it's a yearly term.
And it is something that the instructional mentors, if those individuals are on their caseload, they are having those conversations and meeting frequently to ensure that they're getting it done. But I mean, to be honest with you, you can lead a camel to water, but you can't make it drink, right? So we can continue to pour into them to say, hey, you really need to get this done. What is your plan? But sometimes some individuals just are not able to.
I'm sure 19 of 21 are named John.
No.
I get it.
See, come on now, I lost a camel.
We can look at extensions for those that don't finish. I mean, there's some, like we've got a teacher that's already on an extension and he can't pass one of the math tests. He's taken it multiple times.
I was going to ask
Breaks
that.
for him.
Does the state of Florida have any kind of extension because they know it's a
They
regular
do, but if
process?
you get a 2-year, if you've never had one before, you can get a 2-year on your 3-year temporary. But that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And otherwise, you have to sit out for a year, which is where some of our paras have to go and sit out and go back into the para position and then wait and reapply again the following year.
But you know, what's really been interesting following the legislative pieces is that I know it was the push of FSBA to work through the state process to try to expand, not lower certification requirements, but give people a longer opportunity, reduce the cost of the tests, those types of things. Like we talked about a 3 to 5 year plan. It's been a huge priority for FADS, and they did a work committee, have written language and submitted language to legislative staff. But right now, you're just not hearing anything along the halls in Tallahassee about really addressing this issue that is such a critical need.
One of the things that seems to be a theme is not being able to pass a test, specifically in math, right? So what, I know that there are some things that I've seen in the community, I think like OCA had like tutoring or something like that a couple days ago. What are we doing to help folks study and practice for that test?
We have test camp. It's done through Dr. Scott Weiss. And it used to be just a voucher system, but now with the grant money that we were allowed to get this past year, we've opened it up to any teacher in the district. So that information was shared out with principals before the break, at the beginning of the school year and again in October. So anytime a teacher calls our office and says, I can't pass the test, I'm like, well, are you using test camp? He teaches test-taking strategies as well as some of the content areas.
Okay.
He guarantees you'll pass the test, but the teachers don't
Does
have
he
to
really?
pay anything.
I mean,
If you pay for it, they'll give you a money back, but this is something free to our teachers.
Okay.
And I know with Justin's group, you're using tutoring, 360 tutoring or 240, yeah, another tutoring system that we have available to teachers.
But not everybody goes through that?
It's some of them don't want to take the time because it is a class that you have to take online. And I know with our gentleman that needs to pass the math test, the math coaches worked with him, and I know the mentor coaches, some of them are math and science coaches, so they do take time to work with those teachers to help them. It's just some people just don't take tests well.
So for a teacher like him, is there a different, like you said, you identify different areas that?
That's part of the general knowledge, and so that's non-negotiable.
He's a social studies teacher and he needs to pass a general knowledge math.
Janice's department also provides test prep, for example, for the reading endorsement program.
Right, we
which
provide
is
reading and
required.
ESOL. We provide the reading and ESOL, which is something that they can go and do online, on demand. And they go through the entire course, and then they can take the course or take the test. We have found that, a lot of them have been successful after taking that. But again, it's really how much time they take to do the modules that are in there and go through the materials.
So that brings me to another point. I work in corporate, so corporate Terry's gonna put on a hat. Well, now, I work nonprofit now, but whatever. Okay, so we have professional development classes that we can take, right? I'm assuming folks go to those, right? Is that within our scope or within your scope as a superintendent to say your professional development until you pass this test is to go to these classes? Is that something that is?
I can't mandate that they take it.
Why? I'm not saying, I'm not questioning you, I'm just asking the questions because we don't have teachers.
Yeah, I know.
So-
We certainly could look at that from a working condition standpoint. I think it would have to probably go through.
I have some numbers I can share with you, though, in
Yeah.
terms of how many are participating. Like we
But
just
allow them to substitute though, not on top of. You know what I'm saying? So to her point, if this person needs to get certification in the
Yes.
field, and they're taking 3
Substitute
hours of
the load.
modules,
Exactly.
don't make them take the other PD stuff that they
Right.
want to do on top of it and add to the
No, we
load.
do.
We're talking about substituting it out and doubling it up and killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Right, so right now, for example, we just finished our winter courses, and I'm reporting on this later, so I'm just going to share the information now. But our winter courses that just entered, that just finished in the fall, for reading, we had 262 teachers that completed a course in reading alone. Currently registered for reading for this semester that started in January, we have 299. For our ESOL courses, we had 201 that completed in the fall, 477 that are registered right now. So, and it's reading, ESOL, we also offer ASD, which is the autism classes, and gifted endorsement. So those 4 endorsement areas, right now, we have over 800 teachers that are registered in courses. These are all happening beyond the day, I will say. They're having to take these on their own time, and we have the facilitators themselves are classroom teachers that are helping to support.
And it's all free.
One
It's all free
additional
to our
thing.
employees.
Thank you for those stats. And I would love to hear from the teachers, tell me where there's a hole in that. But I do have an additional possible, I'm not in there, so I'm just giving solutions, and I'm like, you may be like, you don't know what you're talking about, which is fine, I may not. But one of the barriers that it seems like you have rightly pointed out is like, these are happening after school. People are tired, they have just been teaching for however many hours. Could we, Sarah, possibly make an investment in having substitutes in that room or something to allow them, and a cohort, right? Allow those folks to actually do this during the day so that they don't have to go after school and do that additional stuff. That's crazy. I realize that things are coming out of my mouth and I'm like, that sounds a little, but I feel like we do have a little bit of a crisis right now and we have to
Think outside the box.
think outside the
The problem
box.
is we don't have enough subs to cover the voids that we got, so I mean, where would we?
Right, so that's a hole in the conversation. Thank you for pointing that out.
That's what I
Something.
get thought
Yeah.
process, though. I like the thought
I'd
process.
almost rather provide a stipend for them to do it on a Saturday or after school as opposed to
Sure.
taking them away from students in the classroom. Because that's one of the challenges that you'll see in academic outcomes is,
Yeah.
they're not learning as much as we
Sure.
need them to learn. Justin had one more thing he wanted to mention.
Two other ways that we also address testing for professional ed is teachers who complete our professional education competence. That covers all of the material that's on the professional ed test. And also we work with the teachers at the school and the administrators. They are rated as highly effective for their final eval on their evaluation. They're eligible to waive the professional ed test if they complete a piece. So we do a number of those each year.
And that's a new piece.
Dr. Bates, can I have something too? CTE, along with HR last year, offered courses for ELA and math for them to take, the teachers and paraprofessionals to take those exams as well. So we had an after-school class that they were taking with our math teachers teaching the class.
Is
We're
there
offering
any-
a lot of that through the
Is there any way to facilitate the exam here?
ALCO offered a test
thinking.
for parapro for students also. So, there's a lot of things that are going on.
Mr. Arguello asked if there's a way to facilitate the test here. It is done through specific testing centers.
Sites, all Pearson
All
BU.
Pearson
Sites, yeah.
Um,
All over the state of Florida. And it all is in person. There's nothing, I mean, well, you can even take it in Georgia. If you're transferring to here, you can take the test in certain parts of Georgia. But it's all in person, face to face.
If there's not like a real convenient, I think the closest one is,
Up by zero.
Yeah, up by-
That's the closest one for us. I think a lot of that too is they also allow for accommodations if you have some type of a disability. So I think that's why they do all the testing at their site. And I think it's always been that way. I don't think it's been any differently.
I can remember going
for a
to that
long
place
time.
in
Yeah.
SeaWorld to take certification
Yeah.
exams 30 years ago.
So, I mean, they've expanded out, but I don't know of anything that you can do like that.
Are you ready for us to move on, and then we'll take more questions and certainly we want feedback from Mrs. Booth and Ms. Kay.
Yes, I need to step out.
Sorry.
Need to.
I know that you had a hard stop at 11. We still have goal 1 and goal 2 to finish up. We have a gap. Is it possible that we reconvene at 4 instead of to finish the
We don't
workshop
have
from
another
4 to
workshop
5?
ahead of that, because we always have like workshop.
We don't have another one. There actually is a gap today, so you can have lunch and all that kind of stuff.
I like that idea.
But if
I
it's
would-
possible to
whatever the
reconvene
rest
at
of the
4,
board wants to do.
we'd have an hour to finish goal 2 and do goal 1.
Whatever the board wants to
Because
do.
this has been very powerful conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm okay with whatever
I'm okay
everybody
with
wants to
4
do.
o'clock.
I'm okay with just, if y'all are here, do it, and I'll watch it later, but I do have to step away.
Yeah, I do like 4 o'clock, because this is substantive,
do
I don't want to rush
Yeah.
for the
You
sake of
cannot
rushing.
do 4 o'clock?
Yeah, just,
Okay, we're happy to
you
keep
guys can
pushing
continue.
through.
I'll just watch it. Okay.
And then I can get individual feedback from you, okay? All right, so let's forge ahead.
Oh, I didn't talk about that. Yeah. So as we mentioned earlier, we do have a team of educators that attended the conference in Puerto Rico that conducted interviews and were able to give 31 conditional offers for the upcoming 23-24 school year. And we have another team that's going in June to do the same thing, to do some more recruiting with Puerto Rico. We have 2 district recruiters that'll be attending the Pittsburgh Education Recruitment Consortium in March. This is our first large out-of-state job fair post-COVID, so we're excited about that. Dr. Allen and Mr. White will be attending that conference.
And one of the things that Ms. Cahoon suggested when I met with her earlier is that we do some marketing boosts, both before and after both of those trips, and we are planning to do that.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll share is Diana has been very active with our partnership with the Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida, and then we continue to expand that. Diana works closely with them on our recruitment efforts, and we've also expanded to providing information sessions on how to become business partners with our schools and how to do business with Osceola District schools. So we've expanded a little bit on that area as well. And then I'll give it back over to Tammy to go over the data.
They've been super engaged.
Oh, yeah. And actually, I think we need to probably even get them hooked up with our small business partner, Trina. So, and I'm sorry Ms. Castillo had to leave because exit surveys has been one of her things that she always wants to talk about, but we are sending out exit surveys, and we're providing some information that has been provided from our instructional staff. As you can see, the majority of the people that are leaving, they're stating other reasons. We thought it was interesting for the lower one to be compensation. You know, I know a lot of our teachers do it, teach because they love and hear the excitement that our children get. So we wanted to make sure that we were sharing that information.
When they state other, is there an option for them to explain what other means?
They do have other, we do have that in there, so we do collect that if they choose to provide that.
And the good, to tag on what Ms. Calhoun said is, the problem with other is when it's the number one category, we have to kind of we have to stratify it a little bit more. You know what I mean? And add that to another reason.
Our REA team is helping us to do a deeper dive with the information that we have in our exit surveys. So they're in the process of doing that. But whenever I look at it and when Tammy looks at it consistently over month to month, the percentages don't change a whole lot. So to your point, we want to do a little deeper dive and try to figure out what else is there.
Yeah, we still keep the other category as a catch-all, but theoretically, statistically, it should be the smallest number. Hey, I really don't know, and that. But if we're the number one reason is other, we don't know the number one reason people are leaving.
Well, that's what Mr. Phelps was saying, that we are having REA dig down into that. And we've also implemented a return. So if you've left and you've come back, we've just started that to say, hey, why are you coming back home to Osceola County? So we are getting results in for that information.
And they have the option on their initial exit survey to request a follow-up in-person, one-on-one survey that Tom and Tammy conduct, so that we get to dig more deeply into what's going on here. How can we help you?
And I've actually done that a few times. We also wanted to provide the support staff, and as you can see, the top reason was better compensation. So going along with what Sarah's saying in her goal work, that is something that we definitely are going to prioritize this coming year. One thing that has come up, and especially at board meetings where we have public comment talking about teachers leaving by quarter, so we wanted to put those numbers before you from fiscal year 20 to 23 and list how many instructional staff have left by quarter. The retention data is also there. You can see fiscal year 20, which we had 13.63, but also we have to think about what was going on at the end of fiscal year 20. The world, we didn't even know if we would even be sitting here today. People weren't really out looking for a lot of jobs, but on the other hand, that's where Dr. Pace was able to provide grace, and the state provided grace on a lot of the certification requirements, so we were able to save a lot of teachers that way. And then you can see fiscal year 21 and 22, the turnover and retention rate there is very, very close and similar.
Can I ask a question there too then? Thinking about what the world looked like in 2020, like you
Yes.
said, us heading into a possible recession, what has it looked like in the past in the school district when we've had this kind of.
2008-9?
Yeah, so is it going to keep people here? I mean, I know we have inflation that we're dealing with too, though, and teacher salaries, but like what historically has things like that look like, and how do we take that into what we're doing?
Well,
Just because.
great news, I have some data here
Good.
too. So in fiscal year 19, our overall turnover was 17.13%. 18 was 14.56.
Do you historically remember 08-09? I don't remember a teacher shortage being high of mind.
Yeah,
I feel like, I mean, you know, like you're saying, people weren't looking for jobs in 2020 because they didn't know what's going to happen. Is
Right.
that the same case? Is that, like, did we have something like that then where people are like,
Well,
I'm going to stay where I'm at
right.
because I know I have income, I know I have.
Yeah.
I can just tell you intuitively, I was the deputy superintendent then coming out of high school, and then I moved to Brevard in 2011. But the first 6 months I was in my deputy role, we were looking at steep budget cuts as a result of where we were from a recessionary standpoint.
The opposites.
We were able to use attrition. We didn't have to lay anybody off, but we didn't add positions in anything that was vacant. We just did not fill from a standpoint. And people kind of just stayed if they had jobs. You are right about that. The only problem right now is we're just in this very different cultural phenomenon as well, where work is not the number one priority
Right.
for folks. I mean, they really want that life balance, and it's difficult in education to provide the flexible work schedules and those types of things that people are looking for.
Can I ask, I'm going to add a number, like this chart here, I can see it possible, so you have the year 20, 21, 22, 23, by quarter. Is there a trend here? Are they high school? Are they middle school? Is it ESC? What is it? A region of the area that is?
I think I can pull that.
And then
To look and see.
I like that.
The other thing, and I know this isn't nice to do to prey upon people, but from what I'm hearing on the news, that a lot of people have overhired in corporate industry and are laying people off. And when that happens, normally I get bankers, real estate people, different industries that people are laying off staff to. So that I'm sure that we need to look in focusing our recruitment efforts to those industries. So I've been watching very carefully to see where locally that hopefully we can find some people. I mean, bottom line, for people to move here in our community, there's no place for them to live. And even if there is a place for them to live, they can't afford it. So that's why I think our 40% for alternative certification, because we are looking at people in our community to work and want to get back to our community in instructional roles.
At some point, it's a controversial topic, I get it, but you know me, I'm not afraid to wade into the waters of any
Right,
topic that exists, you know what I mean? It is what it is, you
Yep.
know? Because even at the FSBA conference, you know, we had a board, right, where you could put there, what are some of your issues in your district? And they mapped them down by small districts, medium districts, and large districts. There's a lot of unique things. One thing that was on every single board was affordable housing for teachers. And I even visited some of the schools, and I'm not gonna name the school, but there was a principal telling me, I wanted to recruit for you, they have nowhere to live, you know? So at some point, talent management, bullet point gotta be, look at what ways the district can get engaged in doing some affordable housing.
Well,
you know,
I
for our
know
teachers.
we actually.
Or staff, just
Way,
staff.
way back when, we've had a board member that was very involved in trying to do something with affordable housing. Actually, it was Tom Greer. He was beating the drum for that and working with the city of St. Cloud.
I think it's going to be important that we call it workforce housing.
Yes.
Because our teachers, because our minimum salary is $48,500, believe it or not, are above the standard of qualifying for true affordable housing as labeled by government, right? But workforce housing for people like first responders, teachers, those types of folks is something that the board certainly could consider.
And I'm saying
working
like
in
immediate
partnership
action, but just
with
something that we start
developers.
talking about, looking at ideas, exploring what other districts are
I
doing.
know we had a
I think Miami-Dade
gentleman
is
here.
doing something.
We had a gentleman here that was actually talking about it. I think it was in regards to the impact fees that came before the board, and he was talking about workforce housing.
Yeah. But the thing is, it almost should be like an initiative more from us, not so much,
Oh, yeah,
okay, letting
yeah.
somebody else do it. Like I said, I know San Francisco did something like that too, where they had a complex that went straight to their teachers. Miami-Dade's working on some stuff. I'm just saying, you know, what it looks like doesn't, I don't know, but I'm just saying that's something that I think at the point we're talking about a strategic plan, we're not talking about just immediately. We should start kind of exploring and see what other people are doing and what other districts are, so we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. 'Cause we're not the most expensive place, but we're getting
Yes.
pretty expensive.
Yeah, we are getting pretty pricey.
I'll add it to my notes.
Right about the time that we were talking about vacancies and how many vacancies are around the state, FADS actually sent out a survey and asked for us to reply. It was right before the Dr. MLK holiday. So what was great is they provided us the data, so we wanted to make sure that you had the data from the surrounding counties. I looked for Brevard to include that, but they did not respond to the survey. But and this number is from number of vacancies that the school district had and the number of allocations, so that's how they got the percentage. So we wanted to share that information.
Tammy, one of the things I had asked you to do was to kind of follow up with Orange, because they are in better shape than most of the other
Right.
districts.
Well, one thing with Orange County is they do have the referendum where they can pay their teachers more money than what we can do. And they do have, they offer stipends to go to certain areas in the county. Like if you decide you want to go to this Title I school, you can get a couple $1,000s more.
Their starting salary is actually $100 less than ours.
Less than
It's a
ours,
grant.
yes. Yeah.
If we can include Polk in there, because that's like our next door neighbor,
Well, they didn't, there wasn't a number for Polk, I don't think they
or
did.
Brevard either.
No, I just grabbed the ones. We were Johnny on the spot, and actually Orange County, all they provided was the vacancy stuff. They didn't even give the rest of the survey stuff, so I don't want to throw them under the bus, but we had everything good. Wanted to make sure that you could see how people are hearing about us. One thing that I found very interesting was the Indeed number. 418 people noted that they found us through Indeed. Indeed constantly knocks on my door wanting us to spend a lot of money with them, but we spend not one dime. They scrape our website and they put it on their job boards. So just to let you know, I am saving taxpayer dollars by not spending money with Indeed, but we still are getting, the majority of our people are finding out about Indeed. So I don't know, maybe we want to spend some more money
Ask
there.
if they're,
Right.
I mean, if they're finding it
Yes.
organically like that.
Yes.
Then adding
We might
something
want to
there,
do some
what would that
boosting.
do for us?
Because I know one of the
There.
things that also is important to notice is that we're not getting the response from our social media ads, and yet that's where we're doing a lot of recruitment efforts, is through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and yet that's not having the impact. So what is?
And our partnership with Career Source that we've started about a year and a half ago, that's been a great partnership too.
With layoffs, Career Source will be an important partner.
Yes.
Because that's where a lot of people will go. Also LinkedIn.
Yes.
There's two things that get me on that. Number one is I don't see Kelly, because we're hiring Kelly to do from our recruitment services to fill in substitutes and the teachers.
They're not listed on here because they provide, they're their own employer, yeah. They
Yeah,
wouldn't.
but I like to see them to provide, I guess what you're saying is that
They're
if they go through
recruiting
Kelly, they
subs,
stay
yeah.
in there, they never come to the district.
Maybe the number of conversions that they make.
That's right.
That's the
Right,
thing that would
right.
help.
I mean, we should probably have information probably at the end of this year on people that have changed over from Kelly to us. From Kelly
Okay.
to us.
So this isn't, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. So we're only talking
we
about
just
those
started
that
with
went straight to
them,
the
right.
district, not through Kelly to
Right, right. And we've also, our employees are getting out there and truly word of mouth is a big thing. You know, I love working for the district. This is my 36th year showing up here every day, doing great things for kids.
And we are still paying the recruitment.
I was gonna
We
say,
still
do we
are,
have that?
62,
Okay.
62 people
Oh, yeah.
that we've paid so far. So, that is a big thing for our employees to get out there and spread the great word about working.
And one last thing, Clayton, I know it's a long meeting, but at the FSBA, they had that guy was like a recruiter of the year. He's like from Haines City, and he has like an alumni program where they formed that. They said
Adam
something about.
Lane. Oh, yeah, Adam
he was
Lane. Yep, we've met Adam.
90% of like, if you went to St.
Yes.
Cloud High School, you
Yes.
love St. Cloud High School, you may make an exception. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So they actually track
Yeah.
all the alumni that kind of, well, the most that they can, graduate from there and try to do efforts to get kids or students who actually graduated from that school.
Yes.
He spoke
Yep.
to our administrators
Yeah.
at the ESAC board.
Yeah.
And he had five
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
All of us here.
I think all of us, pretty much, we're all Osceola graduate kids, except for this one. Yeah.
Right, and so that's what I'm saying, so like,
Yeah.
maybe we could
Yeah.
formalize, or Dr.
Right.
Pace, if we can kind of crystallize something like a
And
more.
we do that, though, when we look at resumes, we do encourage,
But I want to create a program where we're more proactive in that, and like seeking it out. I mean, I know it happens, but I want to be proactive and like have like an alumni outreach, maybe community relations. Hey, that goes out to the world, everyone that went to Osceola High School or St. Cloud High School, we need you, it's like,
Right.
come back to us.
Well, I mean, we could potentially look at like class reunions and that kind of stuff.
oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Like a 5-year reunion
Yeah.
in particular.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And then we also included the bus driver information on there for you too, because, that is a big thing that we suffer from. We've had 28 separations so far fiscal year '23. The top reason that RB is telling me is, we train these people, and then they can go to Disney and work and pretty much pick their hours and what they want to do. So that is something that we definitely are suffering from. So next up, is talking about development, which is our queen of professional development, Ms. Franceschi.
So I'm going to be reporting out on a few items that I'd like to highlight. I do want to mention that it's not only those that are here at the table that are doing all of this work, but, there's a lot of people that are sitting out there and in our departments that are helping to support this work as well. So you're just getting a few of the highlights of the things that are going on within our departments. I wanted to start with talking about one of our partnerships with Florida Atlantic University in particular. I know in past meetings that we have had, we have been encouraged by the board to continue our relationships with universities. And so we have had a great success with the FAU. Not only do we have a master's cohort with ed leadership with that university, but we also have started this new program last July. We started with our first cohort of coaching and mentoring for leaders. Some of the feedback that we received is that our aspiring leaders, so instructional staff that were looking to move up into leadership roles, or new administrators in their roles, needed support. And so by partnering with FAU, they provided some professional learning to a select group of leaders this summer. It was district and principals. And then it has continued through the fall with various follow-up forums. And then we're also doing coaching visits. We call them in-field coaching, where the FAU facilitator will sit and observe the coach, our district person, complete that conversation, have that conversation with an up-and-coming aspiring leader, and provide some feedback. So we're really trying to cultivate a feedback culture so that we're all open to coaching. And reflecting and growing in our own skills. So that's something that's exciting that has been taking place and looking at our leadership work. In addition, we have partnered with EAB, which I know that HR has also been working with them, but that is the Education Advisory Board. We had a kickoff meeting on November 29th, which provided us with additional information on best practices for leadership development and how to sustain our leadership pipeline. One of the things that came out of that meeting and having that conversation about what are those best practices is that we have some things in place that are already working well, and they want to make sure that we're continuing. And you'll recall that you recently approved our CM contract for our principals to participate in that professional learning. So that actually came out as a best practice where we are, through that program, we're developing what are called first responder lists, which allows the principal to really focus on instructional tasks, but yet when the public is coming to, the front office, for example, and needing something, they're not having to wait on the principal, but they are getting an immediate response. They're getting the information that they need so that, there's not a lag in conversation. So I wanted to kind of bring that up. as something that we are continuing to work with EAB. We have 3 different advisory bodies for professional learning, and the one in particular, we have one for instructional personnel, one for support staff, and a district-level executive PD council, which has been working really to enhance their own and build their own capacity in the new standards for professional learning that the state has pushed out, and ensure that those are in place within our professional learning here in the district. And so we're transferring that into what we call our professional learning action plans. And this is, for example, the coordinators in each department or directors in each department is building an action plan of how they are going to provide professional learning and support teachers, for example, in the different content areas. So right now, that council is working to review all of the data that was received from midpoint assessments, from teacher feedback, from lots of different data points, and they are, revising their plans for the spring and developing plans for summer professional learning. I started to also mention a little bit about our endorsement courses earlier. Like I said, we just started our winter, we call them winter courses now. We have a lot of teachers that are going through that. I wanted to make you aware of a new opportunity that has also been out there from the Department of Education. They have made what's called a micro-credential program. It's a 60-hour course that teachers can take through the University of Florida, which is in lieu of basically Competency 1. So we have several teachers. I don't have numbers from the University of Florida yet, okay? But we pushed out the information to everyone that was eligible back in December and reminded them again in January so that they would register for this course. It is intended to be job embedded. And it's 60 hours, and it allows for them to be able to work with those Tier 3 students that really need help without having to get a full endorsement at one time. So it kind of gets them going in that process of earning the endorsement. And that is also available to them free of charge. In addition to that, all of the endorsements that I mentioned to you earlier, I want you to know that they go through a 5-year cycle where the program itself is submitted to DOE for review. Each one of those courses is intended to be a college-level course, okay? So it's not something that, we're sitting over here at the district office developing. There is an actual matrix with standards on it that we have to adhere to. We have to ensure that all of our courses meet that criteria. We submit it to the state. They review it. Sometimes they kick it back and say, we need to adjust this and that, and then we send it again. Once it's approved, then we're able to offer that here in our district to our teachers free. Currently, as part of that 5-year cycle, we're undergoing reviews for our gifted program and our athletic endorsement program. Outside of the 5-year cycle, our reading endorsement program, the state just decided after 2 years, they're revamping the whole matrix. So they just handed us the standards, and we are going through completely revising our reading endorsement program. All of these are being revised now for implementation July 1st. We have to get that approval prior to that. I wanted to share, and I kind of skipped that one. I want to go back to that. We had a total of 65 instructional coaches and instructional mentors that were trained in the summer using our Learn mentoring program. We're excited to report that as of end of January, we now have 142 instructional coaches and mentors that have completed the first part of that training for Professional Learning Series 1 through 4. And then we're going to continue, that is a foundational coaching piece, okay? And then that same group continues on with the Series 5 through 8, and they're going to continue that this summer is when we're going to start that.
And this is our work with the New Teacher Center that we've used over the course of 4 or 5 years now.
That's correct.
5 years, I believe. It started with a grant initiative to develop instructional capacity, train the trainer model in-house, so that now we only have to pay fees to access their tools, but our team can provide the training, and it'll be sustainable.
And we're really wanting to ensure that we have consistent coaching language, so that is also the same work that is going on within our ESC department, within our multicultural department, so that staff that works there is also receiving this training.
One of the most frustrating things for teachers and staff, for anybody really, is when they get mixed messages. So the ESC coach tells me one thing, the learning coach tells me something else, and the mentor tells me something else. So this is helping us develop that consistent language, consistent model for high-quality coaching.
Another great partnership with the university is with UCF. With them being right there, so close by, we have partnered with them for a new micro-credential series for leaders. It's called Driving Principal Leadership for Academic Excellence. We have a team of our school principals that are working with the UCF professors to develop these research-based, competency-based professional learning for our school leaders. And the great thing is that completion of these micro-credentials will lead to some credit towards doctoral program for them as well. I also wanted to report on SAM. I mentioned it earlier, but we've now had a total of 43 principals and 32 assistant principals that have had that have been trained and have successful implementations. We're at 81% of our school leaders that are implementing this model. I think those are the pieces I wanted to highlight. If there were any additional questions, I will tell you that a lot of the work that the team is doing now is planning for the professional learning that is going to be taking place this summer. So we're heavily involved in that for our operational folks, so our support staff as well as our instructional personnel. Thank you, Janice.
As part of the job of that mentor, that coach, to take those new teachers and make sure their credentialing is on time, you know, and like an extra accountability partner and say, hey, don't forget, man, your certificate's about to lapse pretty soon or something like that. We were talking about that earlier.
Yes, that's something that we have actually with our instructional mentors. They do that with their teachers that are on their caseload. So they meet with them and they kind of check in to see, what do you need? What does your statement of eligibility say? Let's make sure you get signed up for that coursework. So it has been very beneficial. I know we have conversations with Angel in the works of trying to make it so it's a little bit more seamless where everyone has a clear picture of what the teachers are needing, because that's a barrier we found, is that getting that information to the instructional mentor to say, okay, you need to go take your general knowledge test. Where are you on this? And so we're working on a system now so that way it'll allow everyone to have a clear picture of what the track is. But that is something that the instructional mentors do side by side with them to support them. But again, like I said,
We're not ultimately responsible. We're not going to hold them accountable.
Right.
But just since they're there.
There's that check of the pulse, like, where are you on this? And they also kind of, we let the administrators know, like, hey, we have one that's really not on the track. Can you maybe have a conversation with them to see what's going on? What are some barriers?
Throughout the teacher talks, one of the consistent comments was the strength of the mentoring program and how it is really helping to support our new teachers. It's not perfect, it's not enough, but it is valued by both veteran teachers who are serving as mentors, as well as others who are fairly new to the role.
And I have a certification specialist, and that's all that not all that she does, but her main role is to hold the hand of all those new teachers as they go through the process. So she works very closely with the mentors to making sure we're getting them the correct information.
It's a lot of support they need,
Yeah.
to be honest. It's a lot of support they need, those individuals that are coming from all sorts. Sorry, go
That
ahead.
goes right into retention.
Mhm.
So in the retaining part here, I don't want to jump ahead.
Go ahead.
So no, go
No,
ahead.
you're
What was
okay.
the next?
That's what we were going to kind of just highlight a few things
Yeah,
in
sure.
the retention piece. Okay, so a few things just that I'm going to highlight that the team's been working on for retention within the district is utilizing our standard reviews. I know Angel referenced it earlier. We have been utilizing that. There's been professional development provided for our administrators to ensure that we have trained them on the importance of the process and that we are conducting those stay-in reviews. So I don't know, I'm not going to assume everybody's familiar with it. So their stay-in reviews are questions that our administrators ask one-on-one of their instructional staff, and it kind of gives them that insight as to what's the pulse, what are things happening, what are some things that maybe that administrator could do to help change, or if you're feeling like maybe my temperature is, I'm thinking about kind of leaving in the next year, well, what can I do as the leader to help change that view? So it really has provided that support for our administrators, as well as allowing an opportunity for our staff to have a voice, to be heard, to share kind of what's going on. Right now, the results that we could report regarding the responses for our stay interviews, we've had 2,522 responses since mid-January, and currently 2,137 indicate that they're going to be staying in SDOC for more than a year. And 283 are likely to move in 6 to 12 months, and then 102 are likely to leave in the next 6 months. So it's very helpful data, so that we can kind of get a pulse to where we're looking at with that retention piece, like for that cycle. Another area that we've been working on in the retention is we conducted and held the ESET 2 earlier this year in September. And that is, ESET stands for Elevating and Celebrating Effective Teachers and Teaching. And that was held on a Saturday at Embassy Suites. We had about 157 instructional individuals attend this event. And this was an opportunity for us to celebrate those educators. And the great thing about ESET 2 is it's our staff, our teachers sharing the great things that they're doing in their classrooms with their peers. So it's really highlighting, yes, and it's really highlighting those individuals, building that capacity of, I have great things happening in my room, and it's an opportunity for them to share that with others within the district. So that was exciting that we held that. And then also something that we have just started was in January at our last superintendent meeting, we implemented the morale moments. So during the superintendent meeting, it's just a brief little moment where we're able to share some ideas and some professional learning on ways that administrators can focus to recognize, to celebrate, to honor, and to elevate their teachers and their staff. And we're really focusing on trying to do things that aren't going to cost much. So really just a simple way to take a moment to say, I recognize you, I see what you're doing, to really help continue to build that morale piece within our schools. And then I know we mentioned earlier about our PDCP program. We've been focusing on providing opportunities for our experienced teachers, again, to really grow and facilitate the learning within our district. So we've tapped them to be facilitators in our new educator symposiums, our endorsement courses, as well as being PDCP facilitators.
And all of that is additional compensation above and beyond.
Yes, and the PDCP program is the program we mentioned earlier about the individuals that choose to partake that can go through the coursework. They come from a temporary certificate, and then once they complete it, they are able to have their permanent certificate. So, questions? About retention, okay.
And actually for the ESET too, we provided them a $100 stipend
yes.
to attend that day too, which was nice since they were giving up their Saturday. But it was very well attended.
It was well
Everybody
attended,
really enjoyed that.
And we actually had Adam Lane as one of the speakers from
Yes,
administrators,
Adam Lane,
the one that we
right.
were talking about earlier.
The one, Mr. Melendez, the one that you were mentioning from Haines City High.
from Haines City High.
Yeah, he was actually a
One of the
presenter,
speakers
so
from-
I sat in his session, so he definitely had the energy. We were actually even trying to recruit him to come here, so.
We tried.
Yeah, we tried. Lastly, I wanted to provide an update on our human resource audit. We were audited by RSM last year, and actually, it was a great thing for our department. We have, of course, totally changed since COVID. Our work is totally different. We used to have the green personnel file that we would print out papers, but now we are trying to go totally paperless. So a lot of our processes have changed. But this was a wonderful opportunity for us to look at our how we do our work and actually document our work better. So I've actually even split our team up into 4. We actually have PLCs in Human Resources Department. So they are charged with sitting and talking about the work that we need to do and putting our protocols in order. So there will be a formal protocols on each thing that we do in Human Resources. So there were 5 areas that needed to be addressed. 4 out of the 5 observation areas have been, but we still we have a lot of work on our employee action forms process with the help of Pete Thorne and his team. But this form has been around forever, and it's really truly a catch-all form. So figuring out how we can break up that form and make it easier for people to use is very hard to do, but we're going to crack it. We're going to do it. So talking about our next steps, updates to the salary handbook to be negotiated across contracts to improve our recruitment and retention strategy. One thing that we didn't bring up too that I thought was great for veteran teachers that we negotiated out of our contract was the rule that they could only bring in up to 5 years of experience. Because if a returning veteran teacher, if they retired from the state of Florida, they had to return at either 0 or step 5, depending on where they left in retirement. I know our surrounding counties, Orange County still has that rule where they will not give you experience credit. So that has really opened the door. to say, hey, come on back. And even our teachers that want to extend their drop and teach for a few more years, we would put them back at step 0. And now, no, I think we put them at step 5, which is really almost the same as 0 with compression, unfortunately. But that has allowed them to maintain their salary. So those veteran teachers are wanting to stay longer and to ask for the drop extensions. Develop scripts and timelines for administrators having conversations with teachers regarding their certification status. As a big thing that has happened with COVID, virtual courier boxes is what we've invented. So as a part of that work, we're taking it a step level. So Angel will have all of the certification information in regards to our new teachers. So the principal, assistant principal, the mentor, the reading coach, the math coach, they all can go to that folder and look to see. So it's just not like the AP has this information, the principal. Everybody will have access to that information to support the teacher better. And also, it's going to help our administrators because it'll put everything there in one spot so they're not having to look through their emails trying to figure out what's going on. Yeah. So we're really using our technology to really do some great things. Our administrative onboarding session to support our new administrators with their roles and responsibilities. We are getting long in the tooth for a lot of administrators here, and retirements are happening. We're getting new, our pipelines have produced wonderful new administrators. So what are we doing to make sure that they are ready to go right out of the chute? Christy Ray has been doing some great work, so we are working together to develop a specific modules that they will go through, like HR 101, investigating 101, hiring 101. So they know our district practice. And that was actually one thing that came out of the audit too on our hiring process with when you go for your interview, it's like a matrix that everybody fills out that everybody knows. So everybody's on the same page. So if I go to Reedy Creek or if I go to Hickory Tree, everybody's using the same matrix to do their interviewing. So here's what Janice was talking about, their development of their spring and summer professional learning opportunities. They did great work with our support staff, very favorable feedback, and actually I was tapped on the shoulder to be a part of this learning opportunity. So Janice, I don't know if you want to talk about your last 2 bullets. Okay.
Sure. And, yeah, we're just working, like I mentioned earlier, on this spring and summer professional learning. And then the last one is the state has also required us to now utilize a very specific template for our professional learning system. And so where we have submitted in the past, and every district looks totally different, they're wanting to kind of make it a little bit more consistent format for everyone. So we're having to take our system and ensure that we're meeting all of the criteria and putting that into this new template. So we're working with lots of district staff and other stakeholders to complete that process at this time.
Any other suggestions or questions? I mean, obviously, this is an area of tremendous focus and need. We know that as we move from a smaller medium district to a large district, we have to put more structured systems in place, like consistent interview protocols, which Tammy and the team have now developed. But at the same time, maintain that balance of site-based hiring decisions, because that really determines, the needs of our schools are different. Across the district, they're very vast, and so it's just finding that balance between having consistent systems and structures and documentation, and also flexibility for our leaders to make good decisions for their schools.
Thank you for your work. Thank you. All the information.
All right, as the Goal 1 team comes up, I know everybody, it's our 3 assistant superintendents. I will have a quick moment for
Yeah.
Good morning, board. Mr. Phelps, should we get started? Why you wouldn't? Okay. All right, great. Good morning, board. Thank you for hanging in there with us. Drs. Evans, Reyes, and I, as I think you know, we work very closely together in all efforts for VPK through post-secondary efforts. as collaborative partners, because we really do feel as though when we're working together, the work is better. And also, we want to emulate the expectations that we have for our teachers and staff. So know that we accept full and collective responsibility for all aspects of Goal 1, academic success, which is endeavoring for all students to be successful, future-ready graduates through high-quality, standards-based instruction. One of the ways that we have designed to get there is through the implementation of AVID, which stands for Achievement Via Individual Determination. We use lots of acronyms, as you guys know, so if we use an acronym and not familiar, please stop and let us know. AVID is both nationally and locally research-based approach. It's designed to help students develop both sound academic skills and also be stewards of their own education, K through 12, and then there beyond. AVID was actually introduced in the district almost 20 years ago by then Principal Pace, Poinciana High School. But just last year was the first time that we actually implemented AVID district-wide into all of our schools. One of the foundations of AVID is WIC-OR strategies. That stands for Writing, Inquiry, Collaboration, Organization, and Reading. Those are high-leverage strategies that are now embedded in all of our curriculum unit plans for teachers to utilize. Every subject, every grade level. We continue to expand the efforts of AVID as well as the knowledge and expertise, both of AVID and WIC-OR strategies for academic coaches, our coordinators in the schools, but also among departments. As noted, you can see career and technical education and multicultural, just to name a few. We really want to highlight, because we are proud of two of our schools this year, Pleasant Hill Elementary and Poinciana High Schools, who were showcased national AVID schools this year. So we had teachers and administrators from around the country that were able to see the great things that are happening there. And then finally, on this slide, you'll see the graph that depicts classroom walkthroughs. And as you can see, we're proud of the movement we had both in the use of our CUPS, our Guaranteed Viable Curriculum, teacher monitoring for learning, student engagements through a learning process, and then finally, of course, AVID WIC-OR strategies.
Mr. Allen, I'm sorry. What grades were those two demonstration schools?
Pleasant Hill Elementary and Poinciana High School, so it's the entire school that was showcased.
What are their grades? What are the school grades?
Elementary is C and Tennessee from Poinciana High School this past year. Yes, sir.
So another way we are working to accomplish Goal 1 is through high-quality, job-embedded professional learning. We all recognize, and research does support, that having that high-quality instructional teacher in the classroom is the highest impact on student achievement. So for us, the most important work we can do as instructional leaders is making sure that as district leaders, we provide support and remove those barriers. Teachers expressed a desire to receive most training as job-embedded professional learning. So to increase student mastery of the viable curriculum, we did provide job-embedded professional learning on high-quality instructional materials and pedagogy. Our district resource teachers, under the direction of our directors and coordinators, engaged in instructional coaching style, side-by-side classroom modeling, and planning with professional learning communities. This hands-on approach also provided them with opportunities to identify gaps within our curriculum unit plans, instructional moves, and student achievement. The district team, although we are modest when compared with 4,065 teachers, we did want to take a moment to thank the board for your recent approvals of our partnerships with Carnegie Learning. This provided 266 in-classroom support visits and one-on-one coaching. This support was for our math content and pedagogy to teachers in 15 of our K-12 schools. Beyond those specific teachers, this investment has allowed for simultaneous job-embedded training for school coaches, contributing to our sustainability plan. Similarly, on-the-job professional learning has also been provided through Core Connections. That was specifically for writing instruction, attended by 606 of our K-12 teachers. building our capacity for the new teacher-centered partnership. The district staff has now created what we call our SDOC Learn, and I'll give it what that acronym is. It's Lead, Elevate, Accelerate, Retain, and Nurture. This particular training was provided to 75 instructional mentors and 56 instructional coaches thus far.
This takes us to slide number 22. And for the next two slides, we will review the mid-year data reported by the state as well as NWEA. This is mid-year data we use to monitor items only assessed during end of year state assessments, for example, the FSSA science, the civics, and the year. We will address our actions in response to the reported FAST and NWA data as we go along. In this particular page, we start off with early literacy and math, which are foundational to the future academic achievement of our scholars. We continue to super accelerate students who have unfinished learning, but we do focus on providing a strong foundation for our literalist learners. If we look at that chart, we're really encouraged the indication that statistically significant growth has occurred in early literacy, reading, and math across K1 and 2.
So this is a bright spot.
Now-
There's some not bright spots.
Yeah, I was gonna
but
say,
the team's
um,
prepared to address them.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but am I reading the FAST data correctly? That in every grade level, we're underperforming the state?
That
We
is
are going
correct.
to be addressing that.
Yes. Yeah, so, not as optimistic as results as the early literacy. This data came to us mid-year, and obviously it's
And FAST is the new
concerning.
PMI. I'm getting all these acronyms.
Correct.
Let me get my head
That's the
straight.
new progress
PMI, the
monitoring.
ones that we get the results for, and they took 2 PMI tests already, right? So is this
Yeah.
taking both tests into consideration, or the most second one, which is like the most recent data?
It's showing both. It's
The
showing.
first column is fall,
Okay.
the second column is winter for ELA.
Oh, okay.
The third column is fall for math, and the fourth column is fall for
Oh,
winter.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, we covered it that way. Okay.
Yeah, so.
Fall, winter, fall, winter. Okay.
And, it's clearly, you can notice that while we are growing in every grade level as a district, we are below the state average, number one. And number two, we are not growing enough to close the gap in the state right now. Okay, so that's the concerning part that we're completely aware of. In just a few minutes, we want to convey to you what plans we have to address that. Part of which you heard in Goal 2.
And also, it's important for the board to know and our schools know that this year, we will not have learning gains calculations in the school and district grades. School grades are not going, or they're going to be held harmless, so to speak. But the state will still be issuing grades, and it'll be based strictly on proficiency. How many people are at grade level mastery in ELA, math, and science in the lower grades? In the high school and middle school, you will still have the civics, world history, algebra, geometry, and acceleration data and graduation rate data for the high schools.
Yeah, because it was concerning me too, especially in the math. We're almost half
It's
of what the
very
district is
alarming.
doing. 17 out of 30. No, okay, we're doing good with 7th graders, but man, 16 out of 36 for 6th graders.
Okay, you can turn it over to you, Dr. Evans.
So much like the results, and we're on slide 23 now, much like the results of FAST, ELA, and math, you will see similar trends with the NWEA, ELA, as well as science. The last two charts reflect NWEA algebra and geometry. That data is for both middle and high school. And as you can see, algebra and geometry did experience modest increases in high school and slight decreases in middle school. We are not pleased with this data. We are the leaders of curriculum and instruction, and I sit before you because we take ownership of this.
Since we got the data, what have we done?
In partnership with the Research Evaluation Department, our school leaders, we've engaged in a deep dive data dig on mid-year data. After laboring over this data, it has become very clear that more than one factor is attributed to the decline. We've taken a scrutinous look at our use of resources and taken a phased approach in executing a plan with additional actions. During that first phase, we were all aware of the vacancies since the beginning of the school year. As you've heard from our previous goals, we have joined in the recruitment efforts in collaboration with Human Resources. During the first semester, school supports, including coaches, mentors, and administrators, supported and often covered these classes while also performing their job functions on a daily basis to the best of their ability. While well-intended, this took a toll on the overall achievement of schools, since coaches and administrators were not able to focus on providing guidance and support in their traditional ways. The effects were multiplied in our most high-need schools, who are primarily staffed by new teachers and substitutes. We took a hard look at eligible certified instructional non-classroom staff, as well as other district administrators, and we tapped some of them to fill those most critical vacancies.
So in partnership with the REA department, we engage principals and school teams in data digging, looking very closely at PM2 for some specific areas of growth and specific areas in need of opportunity for us to really hone in on. So after this data dig, we provided the schools, those individual students with common needs, and grouped them appropriately for small group targeted intervention. That is something that we had to do in line with schools. While we supply a lot of data through REA, only schools can really dig down to the individual students. So I want to credit them because they did do that work. Much of the small group support is being completed by school staff. But we're also deploying district staff, as Dr. Evans shared. This includes assisting with the efforts in eyeball-to-eyeball small group instruction with students. So district resource teachers, as well as district administrators and the teaching and learning team, to include the three of us and our chief of staff, are engaged with groups to ensure that we're providing that specific intervention for those students. This looks a little different in the elementary, middle, and high school because they have different needs and are assessed uniquely. So in elementary, meeting the needs of all students means providing just the right intervention for each of them. All students are provided the core instruction. For those who need reteaching, we do so through prior level standards, receiving it in Tier 2 and Tier 3 as dictated by the MTSS process. What this mid-year data provided us the opportunity to further support students is how could they benefit from grade level standard and benchmark specific interventions during small group, during core instruction, and also in different stolen moments of the day. That's unique to elementary because we do not have periods where we shift as secondary does. Elementary schools were introduced to a modified continuous improvement model, or SIM. I myself was a turnaround leader as a principal. Dr. Torres and REA worked at a school under the SIM model as a teacher, and we both saw great results. So this happened at elementary and middle school levels. We're using that as our pathway to proficiency. This model hinges on utilizing continuous real-time data to respond to targeted instruction. So it includes standard and benchmark specific resources, teacher modeling, and students putting pen to paper showing what they know the first time so that we are ensured that they have it solid. Now that the modified SIM is in place, our elementary directors, so that's Stacy Burdett, I believe Olmeda Garcia, and Marianne Rodriguez, and I are engaged at each school with principal coaching. We have principal coaching on a cyclical model, and we've embedded this process just to ensure that we're providing the schools with the guidance, direction, and support so that they can complete the SIM process as we go through the year.
Yep, and middle school and K-8 is very similar to what Dr. Reyes described. As you believe you have discussed at the dais before, there's an intervention time that's built into the secondary school schedules. And so really not only leveraging opportunities for Tier 2 intervention in classroom, but taking that opportunity to work small groups of students, again, both with school staff and with district staff and many people sitting in this room. We also, of course, have extended learning opportunities for those kids that have the capability to come before or after school. This is time when we really ramp up those opportunities for kids to give them extra time and extra support. And momentarily, Dr. Evans is going to describe her plans as the high school leader, but she's also going to be going over graduation rates. And Dr. Reyes and I just really wanted to reiterate, and we know you've seen the graduation data, and there are some highlights, but there's also a lot of room for opportunity. But this is not a Dr. Evans set of data. We all own graduation. It's been said that it's the closest thing to an end product that educators have. And so it takes all three of us, and we all own that data. It's not just Dr. Evans alone.
One of the things when we looked at the data in December, because I met with the team in December to look at all of this information, we identified not only do we need to do the Tier 2 and Tier 3 instruction, that intervention piece, and use district resources to do that with Mike Chandra and Belinda's leadership and Scott's, but we've also got to look at Tier 1, because the state is not growing a lot, but they're going faster than us. That means we're not keeping up with the way our students need to be driving. So what we thought we were doing isn't working. So instead, we've got to look at what are we doing differently. So Andrea in math and Beth in ELA and Cindy in science have been digging deeply into our curriculum unit plans, simplifying those, getting them down to those core standards that we know are going to be tested, that kids have to master, and to build in that reiterative process of making sure that kids have the opportunity to do it, but also that using our school city tools and EduClimber, we can monitor the progress between now and May when tests begin. So we know we've got a short period of time, but we're committed to doing the right work and making sure we're doing what's going to work with kids. I feel like we have better ELA and math resources with the curriculum investments we've made in the last 2 years. But when something's not working, you don't keep doing the same thing. You've got to look and dig more deeply into doing something different. And so that's what the team has been committed to
What about
over the
that?
course of the
I
last
know
month.
you alluded to it earlier. What about the triple I intervention time? Like we said, we're looking at maybe, again, having a class period, looking at how we do block scheduling, or having a course, even if it's not reimbursed fully from the state, that they can have time to always be there.
Yeah, the important thing, Mr. Melendez, is not just carving out the time, because we have the time, but making sure that within that intervention time, we're using research-based materials and strategies that are going to actually improve instruction. And that's what Dr. Torres's team has been really helpful in identifying what's working. That's what we need to do, and not do some of the things that weren't working.
So while middle and high school are similar in our need and in our structure of our school support approach, definitely one of the things in response to address the concerning that-year data, the sense of urgency for high schools is now. What are we going to do now? So if we go over to chart 25 on page 25, you'll notice that the charts provide context to graduation rates relative to our neighboring counties and, of course, our rate over time. One of the things that we did unique for high school after completing our data digging sessions, myself along with the high school director, we met with all of our high school leadership teams to review expectations specifically regarding their site-specific graduation monitoring plans. We collaborated with each high school principal to identify specific action steps for monitoring the following focus areas. We looked specifically at senior grade point average. We looked at specifically senior credit recovery through Edgenuity. And then we also looked at their reading and math concordance preparations for SAT and ACT. Biweekly graduation plan progress reports from each high school will provide us with opportunities for continuous monitoring. We don't want to wait until we get to the end to discover what we could have done. We want to address it now and ongoing.
Mr. Melendez asked me quietly, why did everybody's graduation rate go down? Why did the state's graduation rate go down? For the past 2 years, the state had given grace regarding the testing component of the graduation requirement. So while we were still giving the SAT and the ACT and the FSA, it did not prevent students from graduating if they had met all of the other requirements for credits, GPA, those types of things. This year, the testing component was required, and for the class of 2023, that concordant score on the SAT and ACT has been raised, and they've eliminated PERT as an option for meeting the Algebra 1 testing requirement. Right? However, we still went down
Still
more than
low,
others,
yeah.
correct? But I do think it's important to note as well that when you take out our charter schools, we are at the state average for graduation. And not to say that our charter schools aren't there, but we know we've got a little bit more work to do, particularly with Victory and Main Street, on supporting them in that graduation effort. Main Street is an alternative option, just very much like Zenith, but Zenith is still at 59% and Main Street's at 30%. So we know that we can all do better on that for graduation rates.
I appreciate how you broke it down by school, though. So how these statistics get lumped together. It's nice to see that.
So while we are definitely focusing on the portrait of a graduate, we did take a moment to kind of look back and flip the lens a bit to look at the portrait of a non-graduate. Let's talk about the kiddos that didn't make it to that finish line, right? So we had to ask ourselves a real question. What is the need of these students? And what aren't we doing to help them? To address the needs of our non-graduates, we traced back the trajectory of their educational experience, and we were able to find that 40% of the students that were non-graduates from our previous cohort, they were with us from our school district. They were actually from other districts, other states, and other countries during their high school years. We only had 60% of them with us here in Osceola County since their 8th grade year. Tracking back their achievement, we found 45% of those 8th grade students were actually enrolled in an intensive reading or demonstrated a reading deficiency. Our district program evaluation, it actually mirrors nationwide research, which found that students with significant reading deficiencies in 3rd grade are less likely to show proficiency in high school ELA. This also lessens their opportunity, unfortunately, to graduate. The most influential variable for 3rd grade reading success is preparation in a quality VPK program. Again, stressing the emphasis of us being a VPK 12 team. This is why we have focused on strengthening our VPK programs and ensuring availability at every elementary school. We are encouraged by the mid-year data that Dr. Reyes shared with us earlier because it is definitely strengthening our pathway for students towards proficiency.
One of the things that we implemented in primary, as you know, a couple of years ago is open court. And now as you look at those 2nd grade scores, because they were the ones who started in kindergarten, that is working. I mean, it's clearly helping us get there and close that gap with the state.
Can I speak on that? Because I taught
Yes.
for ESC students. So in particular, when I was in the 2nd grade classroom, we had students in return who had the huge gap for being digital learners only coming in. And those the students have had a kindergarten, 1st grade experience coming in. Open court was everything, and it's not just the phonics. They didn't have the phonics skills, and you're expecting to read at this level. And as a classroom teacher, you've expanded your levels of what students can actually do. And speaking of tiers and all of that, I didn't mean to kind of go off topic here, but it's a challenge to be an elementary educator right now. I can just say, and all education in general, but those young students coming in with the foundation and everybody coming in at different levels, and it is still being felt, that ripple, moving to 3rd, moving to testing grades, and things like that. And so I guess if I can speak on a generic question here, are we getting real feedback from educators on what's happening? Why do they think these numbers look this way too? Because research and data and all of that, but in real time, with like what's happening in the classroom, it's really important to have the day-to-day, what's working and what's not. I mean, if you have a III environment, are you getting tier 1 kids, 45 of them during your 15-minute slot, or are you actually able to work with a small group of 5 or 6? Because it's just, there's a lot of challenges, and I'm one from an educator coming in and want to see success with all. But that, back to the gaps with the elementary and the phonics, Open Court just spoke to me, because that is tangibly, you can see the difference when you use that program with the kids, what has and has not, and to put that together with the equity is
We have confidence in looking at our data that, yes, that's good.
Yeah.
But clearly, we have some huge gaps to go in the grades that are going to count for our accountability system, which is an area of focus. I apologize. We do not want to cut this conversation short. We're happy to come back together, talk with each of you individually, because obviously this is the meat of what we need to do. And this is our mission, right? And we're not being successful at our mission. But you guys have the Four Corners board. I will buy you lunch if you want to tell me what you want before you go upstairs.
There's one question I do want to ask before I leave, is, because that's the beginning, I also want to know what to tell it. Now that we have Osceola Prosper going through, I know we had some database shared with Valencia College. I want to know how our students are doing there too. Because like, are they taking remedial classes before they take their math? You know what I mean? Are they failing in their class? Like, what is like their GPA? That's something as a continuation. We don't have graduation rates, but how successful? Because now that Prosper is like almost, I don't know what percentage is going. That's a high amount. And I want to see how they do.
And actually, CFeed will give us that particular data at the end of this year when we look at this freshman class at Valencia College. We also have some positive data at the end. If you look at our middle school students taking the college entrance exam, not to cut you guys off, but just to move through some of this quickly. Significant increase in the number of AP exams that were passed last year. Industry certifications up from the year before. So we feel like that is good. Our dual enrollment went down a little bit. We talked about the fact that Valencia stayed digital. So that was down, and our number of AAs went down slightly by 4 students, but that's, I don't think, a significant number. This is still up from like 11 in 2016, so we feel good about that. But our Zello piece is the other thing that's monitoring those completion plans and what they're going to do next. This just gives you some idea of next steps. We've already talked about it, and we welcome your feedback. Like I said, we know that this is an area where we are focusing all hands on deck with 31 district staff members now serving on a day-to-day basis in classrooms, either half the day or part of the day, and then our other district leadership, 78 of them, providing those small group interventions and supports.
Can I address one of Mrs. Booth's questions? Mrs. Booth, one of the things that schools were saying is there's a high amount of need and not enough hands to really have small groups. These small groups are looking like classes, and that's really where the district team came in to make those smaller groups and attend to the needs of those students. And then also in looking at why is this happening, when you look at that, I think someone mentioned math in particular. For example, third grade math. Third grade math, the PM1 and PM2 had work with fractions. That's not going to be taught until second semester. So although we know what's going to be in these, in the FAST, we don't know which are going to be thrown into which PM, right? So our scope and sequence, as an example with math, may not have matched, and some other district might, because that's how they built it, and it just so happened that what they chose is what was in that PM. That doesn't take away from the fact that the students didn't know it. So at this point, what we're looking at with this is, regardless of what was in scope and sequence, what's left to be taught, what do we know we taught and they didn't get, and what do we know needs to be taught and we need to double check before we get to PM3. At the end of the day, we know the standards and benchmark in the case of ELA that they will need to master by end of year. So we're taking this data as it is. Do they know it? Do they don't? Have we taught it? We need to reteach. Have we not taught it? Then let's take a different approach in what we do for children. That's where that tier 1 is going to be heavy versus an intervention for something we've already taught. Does that answer your question?
So so you just said that the fast progress monitoring that's happening, we don't know what is going to be on the mid-year?
So there are standards, there's clusters of standards, because there's so many standards particular to math, that they couldn't possibly build a test that a child would have the stamina to take of all the standards in the year. So they divide it out by clusters. What I was trying to articulate is that we don't know tit for tat which cluster they're gonna use for which PM. So as an example,
Like fractions and decimals or something like that. So they tested fractions, we taught decimals in our guidelines, so we know we're perfect decimal takers, but decimals wasn't on the second fast test.
Right. But I just wanted to stress, at the end of the year, they need to know it all.
Right.
Right? So we still are responsible to ensuring that the students master those standards. But what I'm saying is particular, let's say to math third grade, this isn't a reflection that not all students were taught this material and they did not master. Some of this material hasn't been scheduled to be taught.
But so how do we fix that so that our students are not sitting there looking at a test and saying, I haven't learned this yet, how am I supposed to answer this question? Because I have a student in particular, my child, that she gets frustrated. She's not a good test taker, and when she sees something that she doesn't know, she's not going to be able to look at it and say, what of this do I know? You know, so how do we fix that
That's
then
by
for our
design, though.
students?
So the exam theoretically the first time you take the test, it's the test that you're supposed to know at the end of the year. So you take it 3 times so you can
But you just said it
test
was
its
different
monitoring,
though,
so you're not
from
going to
the
know those
first
things.
to the second, I thought.
So they have clusters of each of those standards for math.
Because are the clusters changing? That's what it's made it sound like. The clusters were changing each time.
There's
But it's not the
questions.
same.
The questions in the clusters might change, so you're not gonna be able to put a math question for every single benchmark. There are 4 or 5 different things you learn with decimals. You're gonna have a decimal question in 5th grade, but it's over the entire year. So any student who wants to be perfect at the beginning of the year is going to be frustrated because it is a pre-post assignment instead of adaptive like NWEA. And that's the way that test is designed. But think of it as we get information back that says the general overall main idea or strand. And that's really what we get back when we get data. And then we have our own common assessments that we get data on. But in those larger strands, we don't know how the questions were delivered on decimals. I don't know if it was a word problem. I don't know if it was an algorithm. That is the really granular stuff we don't.
But we do know, the schools and teachers do know which benchmarks were assessed by which students, but not every student is getting the same test. They're getting it generally the same test. It's adaptive based on that student, but all strands are assessed equally according to the blueprint, but just not every benchmark.
So I think, and to Mr. Arguello's point too, remember this is basically an end-of-year test. So when you look at even the state average, 39% proficient in the winter. I mean, that's alarming, right? We want more than 40% of our kids to be proficient, but we're at 31%. I'm more concerned about the fact that the gap with the state has widened as opposed to where we are on that particular piece, although obviously 17% is not acceptable to be at proficient at the end of the year, but we've got to get kids there. And that's what we're committed to doing. And yes, we had a pandemic, but everybody in the state dealt with the pandemic. So we can no longer use that as an excuse, not that we make excuses anyway.
Can we have updates, not more than just today, because to even just touch on this for 30 minutes,
Yes.
I need days with this, just so
I think we
can
need
make
about an hour to
true
do this, and hopefully then we'll have some data from our STEM process that's showing the improvement that everybody needs, that we've got to see.
Because maybe we can get an update, because we have the state versus district and FSA, or FAS, whatever. But not on NWEA. So I'd like to see how we're doing on
The
NWEA.
state doesn't do NWEA.
Oh, state doesn't do it? This is we do?
It's a national norm test.
Okay, never mind.
And is there anything on that?
Are you good? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time today and for all the input that we've had. This is a great informative session and packed, and look forward to getting updates, so thank you.
We'll get that scheduled this afternoon.
And I appreciate hearing from everybody too. It's nice hearing each department, you know, crawl out of their shell, so to speak.
Thank you, team, everybody for being here. Thank you for your investment of the time to hear what everybody else is doing. We do know that this is a team effort. It takes everybody on the team in order to accomplish our strategic plan initiatives and goals. I also want to say